Chapter 450. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness was being chased by Wu Ming was because Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through the white dragon scales on Wu Ming's body after using dragon seed. The white dragon scales on Wu Ming's body weren't hard. Instead, they were quite tough. When Arthur's attack landed on them, it was like punching cotton. It wasn't very effective. It wasn't that Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through Wu Ming's defense. If Wu Ming just stood there and let it hit him, it would be fine, but Wu Ming's claws were not to be trifled with, not to mention that he also had other magic spells. Don't forget that after using Dragon Seed Incarnation, Wu Ming's strength was comparable to Wu Ming's body before entering the big source. The Root Dragon's body was no joke. Therefore, Star Cup's consciousness had only one way, and that was to distance itself from Wu Ming. The consciousness of the Star Cup pulled away from Wu Ming and compressed the Sky Strike and even the God Strike into its palm, presenting a compressed attack. Naturally, Wu Ming's scales were just decorations. That was also the reason why Wu Ming chased after Star Cup's consciousness. Because Wu Ming also knew that was why he kept chasing after it, which led to the current situation. It could be said that if either Wu Ming or Star Cup's consciousness made a mistake, they would suffer a fatal blow. That was the reason why mistakes between masters could be fatal. Damn it. Can't you stop chasing me? Star Cup's consciousness said angrily. Then, Artesius's body merged into space and disappeared. Wu Ming, on the other hand, used his perception to find the place where Artesius appeared through the characteristics of space and time. Although the characteristics of space and time were very weak in the Dragon Seed Incarnation state, it was enough for Wu Ming to catch up with Star Cup's consciousness again. When Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius's body to come out of space, Wu Ming was about to touch it again. Star Cup's consciousness had no choice but to continue running. And why did it not come out directly after merging into space? Maybe it was because of the root black mud, which made it subconsciously not run away. That was also the reason why Wu Ming said that only one of them could survive. It was like a battle between old enemies. Although it was very frustrating and weak, it couldn't escape. Do you think I'll let you go when I've already revealed my true form? Wu Ming teased the consciousness of the Star Cup. If Wu Ming didn't use the Dragon Seed, or if Wu Ming didn't use Dragon Seed, Star Cup's consciousness would probably leave this world directly. Wu Ming's consciousness only had power on this planet's body. Wu Ming might not come back, thinking that it was better to avoid trouble. Although Wu Ming promised Artesius to take care of his skywing species, Wu Ming reckoned that they would very likely return to Artesius after seeing Star Cup's consciousness using Artesius's body. After all, although Artesius had entrusted the skywing species to Wu Ming, no creature would follow a new master wholeheartedly. In that case, Wu Ming would have to wait until he dealt with the mastermind behind the burning of humanity before he came back to solve this small problem. But then again, this Star Cup's consciousness is really just a consciousness. Wu Ming began to mock Star Cup's consciousness. The expression of Star Cup's consciousness, who was using Artesius's body, also changed. This meant that Wu Ming was right. Although Wu Ming had fought with this Star Cup's consciousness more than a dozen times, the other party did not have any special abilities and had been using Artesius's ability the entire time. Logically speaking, the Star Cup represented the sovereignty of this planet. Holding the Star Cup meant that it was the master of this planet, which was the so-called only God. In that case, shouldn't the consciousness born from the Star Cup be in existence like Gaia? This was also why Wu Ming had used the Dragon Seed when he fought with the other party. It was because only with this clone did Wu Ming have the confidence to fight against such a super powerhouse. In the end, Wu Ming discovered that the other party was not really an existence similar to the suppression power Gaia. It was just a consciousness. It could only use the Star Cup's power to sneak attack Artesius. In other aspects, it still needed to rely on someone else's body to move. Did this not prove that the other party was actually bluffing? If it's really as I think, all you can do now is use Artesius's ability. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes at the other party. In that case, Wu Ming also began to suspect that this consciousness did not belong to the Star Cup. I have to admit, Wu Ming, your intelligence is not lower than mine. The Star Cup's consciousness that was using Artesius's body continued to fly. While dodging Wu Ming's attacks, it said in a dull tone. It should be because you can't use the power of this world that you exposed yourself. Wu Ming was still following behind the Star Cup's consciousness. He would not stop attacking just because he had a conversation with the other party. You're right. I'm indeed just a consciousness. Without a body, I can't move as I wish. That's why I wanted to instigate Artesius, the most powerful war god. Then, the Star Cup's consciousness became happy. However, I didn't expect him to be such a blockhead. He knew that he would die, but he didn't accept the power. That's just as well. I've helped him by taking out his spirit essence. The Star Cup's consciousness showed a proud expression. This made Wu Ming even more displeased. I'm sure Artesius's soul in the elf corridor is angry that you're using his body. As he spoke, Wu Ming had already started to gather flames in his mouth. Like a heat ray, a fire dragon rushed toward the Star Cup's consciousness. The Star Cup's consciousness was still controlling Artesius's body to dodge. However, because it was a fire ray that was connected to Wu Ming's mouth, the Star Cup's consciousness had a hard time dodging. Then, it was grazed by Wu Ming's white flame. Kaboom! The space fluctuated violently. The other party escaped into space. The remaining flames swept across the ground, or rather, the ground that had turned into a sea made a series of explosions. Due to the excessive power, Wu Ming had already distanced himself from the Star Cup's consciousness after he stopped shooting the flames. Ha ha ha. You've finally fallen for it, Wu Ming. The Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. I didn't show it earlier. Insulting Artesius while using his body was enough to make Wu Ming slightly angry. It used this to provoke Wu Ming so that Wu Ming could not stop the flames in time. In other words, Wu Ming had used a skill that required a long time to cast. At the same time, the Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius to gather a thin light needle with unknown energy in its hand. It was a divine strike that was even more condensed and mixed with the power of origin. You can condense the divine strike to such a degree? Wu Ming was shocked. Although he had expected Wu Ming to use the divine strike that was mixed with the power of origin to attack Wu Ming did not expect it to be able to condense the divine strike to such a degree. If it was the divine strike, Wu Ming's scales would not be able to block it. This is my advantage as the Star Cup's consciousness and the origin black soil, the Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. Goodbye, Dragon of Origin. The Star Cup's consciousness shouted and threw the divine strike at Wu Ming. The divine strike needle thrown by Artesius' body was quite fast. Wu Ming, who could not use Phoenix for the time being, could not dodge it. The divine strike needle was aimed at Wu Ming's brain. It had to be said that the Star Cup's consciousness was quite high. If it pierced through his heart, Wu Ming would definitely not die. However, if it pierced through his brain, even if he did not die, he would fall into a coma. In this way, Wu Ming would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, it did not matter what the Star Cup's attack was because Wu Ming was prepared to defend against any kind of attack. No, he could steal it. With a flash of golden light, Wu Ming flew into the sky unscathed. The Star Cup's consciousness looked at Wu Ming in disbelief. How is this possible? Chapter 451. The heaven and earth anomaly that was triggered by the divine striker needle just now gradually disappeared along with the disappearance of the divine striker needle. The sky became gloomy again. Because the sky was gloomy to begin with, and because it was night time, the sky seemed even gloomier at this moment. Logically speaking, the divine striker needle released by the Star Cup's consciousness should have hit Wu Ming. However, the divine striker needle disappeared after a flash of golden light, and Wu Ming was completely fine. Checkmate. Wu Ming took advantage of the Star Cup's consciousness shock and flapped his huge wings as he charged toward it. The Star Cup's consciousness quickly recovered from the shock and quickly retreated. He was prepared to use his spatial ability to escape into space and get away from Wu Ming again. He must still have some trump card. The disappearance of the divine striker needle must be related to the opponent's trump card. I don't believe that trump card can be used continuously. If there's another chance, he'll be done for. The Star Cup's consciousness thought as he looked at the huge dragon's shadow that was approaching him and smiled proudly. As long as it was not the end, the victor was not certain. Then, he was caught by Wu Ming's dragon claws. Bam! Wu Ming's body, which was controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness, made a sound that resembled the sound of metal colliding. Clank, then, the sound of chains could be heard. Golden ripples appeared out of thin air, and a golden chain that seemed to have infinite length extended from it and firmly bound the Star Cup's consciousness in Wu Ming's hand. This way, with the heaven lock that was baptized by the origin black mud in the body controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness could not come out. How is this possible? How can I not use my spatial ability? The Star Cup's consciousness said in a panic. After a moment of panic, the Star Cup's consciousness also discovered the problem. Now that he casually looked around, the space around him was filled with tactics that he had never seen before. These tactics covered the surrounding space and extended into the distance. These tactics seemed to have locked the space and were firmly attached to it. Although they were separated by a few meters, an invisible force linked them together. As a result, the surrounding space, or rather, the space in the southwest of the Yar-Ala continent, was locked by these tactics. In short, the space that originally allowed free passage was blocked, or rather, blocked. Why do you think I've been chasing you in this place in the southwest of the Yar-Ala continent instead of going to other places? Wu Ming said to the Star Cup's consciousness that was struggling in his claws. Although the chase between the two only took place in the southwest part of the destroyed Yar-Ala continent, it was still not over yet. Firstly, Wu Ming had purposely trapped Star Cup's consciousness in this place. Secondly, this planet was its palace to Star Cup's consciousness. If it could deal with the enemy in one room, it would naturally not affect the entire palace. After all, no one would choose a plan with less benefits, and the consciousness of the Star Cup was the same. I've been waiting for this moment to come, Wu Ming said in a final tone. The heavy rain of Star Cup's consciousness fell into the fishing net that Wu Ming had set up for a long time. Wu Ming had set up a space lock tactic in the space, and Star Cup's consciousness did not leave this area. In the end, the space lock tactic in the southwest part of the Yar-Ala continent formed a link and formed a magic circle. The magic circle tightly locked the space in the area where Wu Ming and Star Cup's consciousness were. In mathematical terms, it was 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, plus 1 + 1 equals infinity. If it was only a single tactic or multiple tactics, Star Cup's consciousness could use Arthas's physical ability to use the spatial ability to escape. However, the space lock in the southwest part of the Yar-Ala continent had already been formed. In addition to the binding of the heaven lock, Star Cup's consciousness could forget about escaping. Impossible. As Star Cup's consciousness, how could I not discover these tactics that you've set up? Although Star Cup's consciousness did not have much combat power, Star Cup's consciousness could be said to be unprecedentedly powerful in terms of perception, investigation, and so on. No matter what, it was still the consciousness of the planet's sovereign key. Naturally, its spiritual power should be able to detect these tactics. Due to anger, Star Cup's consciousness used its spiritual power to scan the tactics. In the end, it discovered something unusual. The tactics were originally hidden. This was something that both Wu Ming and Star Cup's consciousness knew. Now, these tactics were revealed because they had been activated. Other than that, when Star Cup's consciousness scanned these tactics, it discovered that there were other tactics mixed in with these space lock tactics. It was because of these other tactics that Star Cup's consciousness did not notice the existence of these space lock tactics. Those are tactics that can block perception. Star Cup's consciousness was completely shocked. That's right. There were some shielding tactics mixed in with the space lock tactics. These shielding tactics were like the space lock tactics. They were linked together and formed a magic circle. It was these shielding tactics magic circles combined with the space lock tactics magic circle that caused Star Cup's consciousness to be captured by Wu Ming. Even if it's you, it's impossible for you to have a tactic that can block my perception. As the planet's sovereign key's consciousness, it was impossible for its spiritual power not to notice anything. Also, why did my divine firing needle disappear? How many trump cards are you hiding? Star Cup's consciousness seemed to have gone crazy at the moment. It gave off a feeling that it was at the end of its road and would definitely die. However, Wu-Ming did not say anything else. You don't need to know about this. Return obediently and apologize to Arthas. As Wu-Ming spoke, a trace of lightning and wind appeared on the dragon claw that was holding the Star Cup's consciousness, as well as an invisible source of power. After all, Star Cup's consciousness that had the origin black soil had to be dealt with using origin power. Sizzle sizzle. Lightning crackled. Countless divine lightning surged out of Wu-Ming's body. Whoosh, whoosh. The raging storm was mixed in with the thunder and lightning. Two different forces converged on Wu-Ming's dragon claw that was holding Star Cup's consciousness. No. You can't do this. I am Star Cup's consciousness. I can help you gain control of this planet. Star Cup's consciousness seemed to be aware of its death and frantically begged for mercy. On the contrary, Wu-Ming felt a bit strange. Arthas was a wise man. Other than that, Wu-Ming didn't think that destroying Arthas' body would kill it. Boom! Wu-Ming didn't waste any more time and directly crushed the clone's body with the power of Thunder God's avatar and Storm's avatar. The voice of Star Cup's consciousness stopped abruptly. Wu-Ming looked at Star Cup that was revealed and looked at it vigilantly. He constantly scanned it with his spiritual power, but he didn't find the existence of Star Cup's consciousness. Is it really dead? Wu-Ming wondered. Of course, it wasn't that simple. In the distance, the current capital of the Forest Elves, Temple of Canas. In the Temple of Canas, where the Forest Elves worshipped, with a stream of light, a green figure with burning flames appeared. Chapter 452. Damn it. Dragon of Origin. The green figure said viciously as he sat weakly in his own temple. This figure was the forest god Canas who had taken Rick's right arm. However, his tone was rather strange. If Wu-Ming was here, he would definitely recognize this tone. This was Canas, who had just been destroyed by Wu-Ming and replicated by Arthas' body. Arthas had rejected the Star Cup. In order to ensure that he could come out of the Earth's core, the Star Cup's consciousness chose another god, which was Canas. The Star Cup's consciousness used the Star Cup's power to erase Canas' personality and then took control of Canas' body. However, unlike replicating Arthas' body, the Star Cup's consciousness simply controlled it and did not integrate itself into it. This was also why Canas, who had taken Rick's body by surprise, was expressionless. After that, when Wu-Ming was fighting with the Star Cup's consciousness, in order to not let Canas escape, Wu-Ming used his familiar authority that he had not used for a long time. When he killed Neza in the God Slayer world, Neza wanted to continue fooling around and did not want to return to the myths, so he turned into Wu-Ming's authority, which was familiar with self-awareness. Then, Wu-Ming released Neza to stop Canas. Canas, who had temporarily lost the control of the Star Cup's consciousness, was judged to automatically attack the enemy, so he fought with Neza. Simply put, it's hanging up the phone, for all. Then, because the battle between Wu-Ming and the Star Cup's consciousness was too intense, Canas and Neza were blown away and continued to fight in the center of the Yar-Ala continent. The burn marks on her body were left by Neza, so using the fire-tipped spear to deal with the forest god was the most appropriate choice. Then, when Wu-Ming crushed Arthas' body that the Star Cup's consciousness had replicated, the Star Cup's consciousness that controlled Canas' body escaped. However, the real result was that the Star Cup's consciousness came to Canas' body and completely took control of her body. It could be said that the Star Cup's consciousness begging for mercy was purely an act for Wu-Ming to see. Its purpose was to make Wu-Ming think that the Star Cup's consciousness was really dead. After all, even Wu-Ming had praised the Star Cup's consciousness as a wise one. In terms of hypostasis, the Star Cup's consciousness should be half a level of suppression, so of course it would not be so weak. Although it had been a noob for a long time. Although Forest God's body's body, it's not weak, I'll just make do with it. After all, the Forest God was a master of 186 spells. He could cast 186 types of spells at the same time. He was one of the best among the gods. Because Canas the Star Cup's consciousness, Kanas's consciousnesses as well. He can't control the star cup anyway, so I don't need to be in a hurry. Once I recover, I'll touch the star cup and use Kana's body to become the only god. Because the star cup's consciousness previously controlled Arthas' body was a defective copy of the star cup's consciousness, it could not be recognized as a god by the star cup's consciousness. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness was not the only god. The reason it did not directly use Kana's body to become the only god was because Kana's body was too weak. Moreover, the star cup's consciousness thought that it could defeat Wuming. In the end, it failed. Although I'm now free from the star cup, Arthas is dead. As long as this body is fine, the final victor will still be me. After all, Wuming was not qualified to become the only god on this planet. Other than Arthas and Wuming, the star cup's consciousness did not care about the other gods. They're just a bunch of fools who don't know how to use their wisdom. They're nothing to worry about. The star cup's consciousness laughed when it thought of the other gods. Even those who were called gods were a bunch of simple-minded people who only knew how to flaunt their innate abilities. Now that the star cup has fallen into his hands, for safety's sake, I'd better stay in this body obediently and wait for him to leave, the star cup's consciousness said. After all, we can't use the star cup. For the sake of humans, he would not take the star cup away. He would definitely leave the star cup for the humans. However, Wuming did not know that humans could not use the star cup either. I really want to see his expression when he finds out that humans can't use the star cup. It'll be very interesting, the star cup's consciousness said with a smile. Then, the star cup's consciousness controlled Kana's body and destroyed the statue of Kana's that was used for worship with magic. It sat on the platform of the statue and began to repair the body. Kana's body was like a vacuum cleaner that was turned on to its maximum capacity. It could be seen with the naked eye that Kana's body was madly absorbing the spirits in the air. Not only was its spirit injured by Wuming, but its body was also injured by Neza. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to recuperate. Now, Kana's body was an existence that would burp if it was hit by the void Zeroth ward or marrow explosion. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to heal the injuries of this body. As a natural god, Kana's and other god species naturally had an advantage. As long as they absorbed the spirits in the air, they would be able to slowly recover from their injuries. After all, there was still someone in the outside world that was not to be trifled with. This place was the capital of the forest elves. The chances of someone breaking in were almost zero. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness could safely absorb the spirits to heal its injuries. Then, the star cup's consciousness that was absorbing the spirits suddenly realized that there was something wrong with these spirits. It was just like when you drank ordinary milk and realized that the milk tasted strange. Then, before the star cup's consciousness could react, Kana's body suddenly exploded. Bang! The explosion of Kanas's body caused the entire temple of Kanas to collapse. The forest goblins and forest goblins who were guarding the outside were all in a panic. The temple of the god they worshipped was blown up, and that was a big deal. The temple had always been the place where the forest elves communicated with Kanas, but now it had exploded? This was no less than the collapse of the family's ancestral hall. It was a heavy blow to the people. As the forest elves panicked and tried to rescue them, Shinka and Nilbar hid in a house not far from the temple and looked at the collapsed temple with cold eyes. Sucking in a fairy that was activated by my Zeroth ward of the void, plus you're heavily injured. What a pity. Lord God, you're finally going to die by my hands. Hee hee. Hee hee hee. Xinka's expression darkened as she spoke, which made the girl behind her a little scared. This way, we can be together, Nina, say. Senior. The girl, called Nina, looked at her senior nervously. Her body kept trembling. Perhaps, she would be very lucky in the future. At the same time, Wuming, who was still checking the star cup, suddenly noticed that something was wrong with the star cup. You finally came out, star cup's consciousness. Chapter 453. Wu Ming looked at the tiny Xingxue on his huge dragon claw and breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know why he couldn't find it before, Wu Ming finally found Xingxue's consciousness. I thought you really disappeared, but it turns out you were still hiding. After all, Wu Ming didn't believe that the death of a mere body could kill Xingxue's consciousness. Sure enough, after Wu Ming's perseverance, Xingxue's consciousness finally came out. Damn. Forest elves. Xingxue's consciousness said weakly. Previously, because Wu Ming destroyed its body, Xingxue's consciousness was weakened. This time, it was plotted against in the Temple of Canas, and now Xingxue's consciousness could no longer stay awake. The Star Cup's consciousness that absorbed the spirit to heal its injuries was like in 4 drip, but someone injected poison into the 4 drip, and all the absorbed spirit was detonated by the Zeroth Ward of Void. Canas was completely dead, and the Star Cup's consciousness returned to the Star Cup because it had nowhere to go. However, it really didn't expect that the forest elves would attack their creator, forest god Canas. Although Xingxue's consciousness didn't pay much attention to Canas, Canas was also an evil god, so why would someone want to kill her? All kinds of questions troubled Xingxue's consciousness, but now, Xingxue's consciousness didn't have time to think about other things. If it didn't solve the crisis in front of it, it would really die. Xingxue's consciousness didn't think that Wu Ming, who could mix a shielding technique into a space lock technique, wouldn't use a technique that targeted its spiritual body, which was its consciousness. Wait. I have something to say. Xingxue's consciousness, who knew that it was already at the end of the road, quickly said. Do you still want to say something? But I won't give you the chance. Wu Ming finally understood that the victor was the righteous one, while the villains died because they talked too much, laughing emoji. Goodbye. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming took advantage of the fact that his sorcerer avatar was still active and chanted the spell again. Noble and powerful, wise and kind. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. In an instant, Wu Ming's inner stone plate, which represented the sorcerer's incarnation, turned red. A large amount of mana surged into the Star Cup. Then, in the silence of the Star Cup's consciousness, which had become even more muddled due to its weakened state, Wu Ming completely eliminated it. Although it was a bit anticlimactic, it's finally over. Wu Ming complained as he looked to the east. Just like what Wu Ming knew, the sun appeared from the east. At this time, Wu Ming just happened to catch the sunrise. Watching the sunrise, Wu Ming logged out of the dragon seed avatar. Wu Ming's gigantic dragon body slowly turned into the size of a human. He once again regained his black-haired, red-eyed, and cloaked appearance. Then, Wu Ming clutched his head in pain. Ugh. The burden is a little too much. The reason why he said that was because more than half of Wu Ming's 12 avatars were now in a state of overload. Overload's red alert state was not the end of it. It also caused damage to Wu Ming's spirit and body. After all, that avatar was not the real body, but a substitute made by Wu Ming. Previously, because of the battle with Artemis, Wu Ming caused his 2 avatars, the Titan and the Sun, to fall into a red alert state and temporarily could not be used. In order to eliminate the aftermath of the battle between the two, Wu Ming used the combination of Annihilation and Flood, and at the same time, those 2 avatars also fell into a red alert state. After all, if it was only Annihilation, it would not be able to reach the range, and if it was only Flood, it would not be able to eliminate the aftermath, so he had to combine the 2. Because Wu Ming's avatar could only use 1 avatar at a time, using 2 avatars together directly entered a red alert state. After that, in order to save Rick, Wu Ming's Phoenix was also unable to be used. Otherwise, Wu Ming wouldn't have to chase after Star Cup's consciousness, he could just use Phoenix to catch it. Fortunately, Wu Ming's avatar was not counted in the number of avatars he could use. Otherwise, Wu Ming would not be able to use other avatars the moment his avatar was on the ground. After that, Wu Ming used Dragon Seed to restore his body to a state where he could use multiple avatars for a short time. With that, Wu Ming secretly used Sorcerer's avatar to set up a space blockade and a space shielding technique. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness did not notice it was because Sorcerer's avatar's casting effect was enhanced. After that, because he needed to destroy Artemis's avatar that Star Cup's consciousness copied, Storm and Thunder God also fell into a red alert state for the time being. In addition to Warrior's avatar, Wuming had a total of 8 avatars in overload. Previously, Star Cup's consciousness provoked Wuming with words, which made Wuming angry, and then attacked Wuming with Firing Needle. At that time, Wuming used Warrior's avatar to seal Firing Needle. After all, Wuming was also a man who fought Artemis before, so he was very familiar with Firing Needle. Although Wuming's warrior avatar evolved from Welaslana's warrior avatar, unlike Welaslana's warrior avatar, he didn't need to chant to use it on the enemy, he only needed to know the knowledge to use it. However, because it was instantaneous, and because of the power of Firing Needle, Warrior's avatar also fell into overload. And Sorcerer's avatar also fell into overload because of Star Cup's consciousness just now. Now, Wuming only had 3 avatars left: Dragon Seed, Dependent, and Vitality. 9 avatars fell into overload. Chapter 454. Vitality Avatar's characteristic: if there is energy that can be absorbed, it will speed up the recovery speed. Even if there is no magical power in this world, there is only elves, but fortunately, Wuming's Vitality Avatar can heal Wuming's injuries without energy, so it's not a big deal at all. After almost an hour, Wuming's injuries were almost healed. Feeling his heart, Wuming found that the red color of the stone plate that entered the state of overload was fading little by little at this moment. It seems that Vitality Avatar can also relieve the overload of other avatars. Although this was the case, Wuming also stopped activating Vitality Avatar. At present, his physical and mental aspects are almost recovered, and there is no need to restore those avatars at this time. After all, Star Cup is still in my hands, I can't use it, and humans can't use it either. I have to think of a way. Star Cup's consciousness said before that Wuming can't become the only god of this planet, and he can't control Star Cup, and humans are the same. Although Wuming didn't think what Star Cup's consciousness told him was a lie, but to be on the safe side, Wuming still checked Star Cup after getting it. Wuming indeed can't control Star Cup, maybe because Wuming himself is not a native of this world. And as for whether humans can control Holy Cup, Wuming doesn't know. After all, Star Cup's consciousness said so. If humans are not recognized by Star Cup, it is likely that humans can't become the ruler of this planet, just like what Star Cup's consciousness said. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. With that said, Wuming withdrew from his inner world and opened his eyes. When Wuming observed his inner stone plate, he sensed that some people came from the outside world, but because the other party was not malicious, Wuming didn't care. However, it was not good to just leave those people alone, so he was ready to come out to meet them at this time. Then he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Wuming opened his eyes and saw many little angels in front of him. Ahem. They were the infant version of Sky Wings, and a huge fantasy breed that looked like a floating island, Abendheim. Anyone who saw this scene would be given a fright. Nearly 10,000 Sky Wings were collectively kneeling on this vast plain. It was a spectacular sight. It was a good thing that Silent Cry had randomly chosen a plain. Otherwise, the Sky Wings would not have been able to collectively kneel here. Moreover, with Abendheim around, this plain seemed a little small. Why are you here? Wuming subconsciously asked when he saw the Sky Wings half kneeling on the ground with their heads lowered. Although Wuming sensed that someone was coming, he didn't expect there to be so many of them. When Wuming didn't release his psychic power, he only maintained a vague sense of perception. Therefore, when Wuming opened his eyes, he was shocked. Soon after, Osriel, who was at the front of the Sky Wings, answered Wuming. Lord Arthas has entrusted us to you. From now on, Lord Wuming will be our new master, Osriel said expressionlessly but respectfully. As the first Skywing breed created by Arthas, Osriel was the equivalent of the big sister of the Skywings. Thus, with Arthas dead, Osriel was the leader. That's true. Arthas has entrusted you all to me, Wuming said and began to ponder. Wuming did not know if the Skywing breed's personalities were like Arthas, where the strong were respected, but since Arthas was worried about his creations, Wuming believed that although these sky wings had been entrusted to Wuming by Arthas, they might not be calm on the inside. Having become the subordinates of the enemy who had killed their master, and having been entrusted to do so by their master, Wuming did not believe that the sky wings could be as heartless as the Triumph breeds. Ahem. Although it wasn't very nice to say that about the Triumph breeds, aside from Shobi, the rest of the Triumph breeds were truly heartless. Wuming released his mental energy and probed the tens of thousands of sky wings in front of him, discovering some clues. Every skywing breed had a sad expression on their faces, and Wuming could tell that they wanted to commit suicide. The reason why they had been able to follow Azrael to Wuming was very likely because they had to obey their master's final order. This was no good. Putting aside whether or not Wuming would order them to do some missions, in this state, they might not be able to survive in battle. 90% of those whose hearts were already dead would die in that battle. The remaining 10% were those who were strong enough to survive even if they fought absent-mindedly. Instantly, Wuming came up with a good idea. "Raise your heads, sky wings," Wuming used his magic and softly said, but his voice still reached the ears of every skywing breed. The skywings raised their heads and expressionlessly looked at Wuming. "Arthas is a worthy opponent, but the two of us have our reasons for fighting." Arthas was doing it for his lifelong wish, while Wuming was doing it for Arthas not to snatch the Star Cup. In the end, Arthas's death could be considered an accident. Wuming had not expected Arthas's spirit essence to be sealed into the throne by the Star Cup's consciousness. If Wuming had really wanted to kill Arthas, he would not have used the power of the flood and annihilation to eliminate the aftermath of their battle. "I won't pretend to be polite with you. Arthas's death is truly an accident." When Wuming said this, not only did the skywings who had thoughts of committing suicide become angry, even the skywings who wanted to obey Arthas's final order frowned, especially Azrael. "But I won't shirk my responsibility. I'll take on this responsibility and the task my friend Arthas entrusted to me." After all, the two of them had hit it off immediately after the battle. Regardless of whether Arthas died or not, the friendship between the two of them was inseparable. Have hope for the future. Don't give up on your lives, because I'll always be waiting for you. I'll wait for you to challenge me until you kill me. Wuming's words caused an uproar among the skywings. Even Abendheim was shaken. It was clear that he was not calm. "You guys also want to avenge Arthas, right? As one of his murderers, you'll definitely choose to avenge him if you can." Wuming was like a demon, tempting the skywings. "I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you guys have practically unlimited lifespans? Then, let your own blade be your lifelong goal." Almost every skywing excitedly flapped their wings. Some really wanted to kill Wuming, while others were excited to be able to challenge an expert like Wuming. Azrael's eyes widened as she stared at her current master in shock. As the big sister, how could she not see that Wuming was giving the skywings hope and a goal to live on? Apart from Azrael, quite a few of the more senior skywings also saw Wuming's intentions. Perhaps letting him become the new master of the skywings wasn't a bad idea. Afterward, the skywings spoke in unison. "As you command, my lord." Chapter 455. After that, Wuming brought the skywing breeds back to Abendheim and began to use Abendheim's restoration technique to heal the skywing breeds. After using all their strength, the skywing breeds would turn into a 10-year-old child and enter a weakened state. Wuming even suspected that Arthas was a Lulicon. In this weakened state, the skywing breed's combat strength would be greatly reduced. It could be said that even the weakest human in this world could kill a skywing breed. In response to this, the skywing species used a technique to develop a set of equipment specifically designed to speed up their recovery. After the skywing breeds used up all their strength and turned into children, they would need about 50 years to recover to their original state. Of course, this number was under the condition that there was no external force, and the skywing breeds relied on their own strength to recover. With the skywing breeds' belligerent nature, they would not be able to fight freely for 50 years. However, this was how the restoration technique was created. Through a special technique, the Skywing breeds developed a device that could speed up the recovery of the Skywing breeds after using up all their strength. In just a few days, the Skywing breeds could completely recover what would take 50 years to recover. Not only that, but if they were heavily injured, they could also go to the restoration technique to recover. Simply put, it was like the spring in the game. However, because there were not many devices, they could only be used in batches. It would probably take several months for the nearly 10,000 Skywing breeds to recover. Wuming looked at the device in front of him. One by one, the Skywing breeds floated in the device, and the spirit around them accelerated into their bodies. Wuming had some ideas. The Skywing breeds shrank because they ran out of energy, and this device is used to speed up their absorption of spirit. So that's how it works, Wuming said after seeing through the mechanism of the device. Your judgment is correct, Sir Wuming. This is the mechanism of our Skywing breed's restoration technique, Meow, Osriel, who had been following Wuming, said with a strange tone. Wuming looked at Osriel with a strange expression. Why didn't Osriel use the word meow before, but now? Could it be that she had forgotten because she was too sad? Wuming thought as he looked at Osriel. Master Wuming, what's wrong meow? Osriel stared at Wuming with her big cute eyes and asked curiously. No, nothing. Wuming shook his head. Wuming felt that if he continued to ask, it might be very bad, so he didn't ask. It was just a habit. By the way, Osriel, come with me. Wuming turned and walked towards a corner behind him. Meow. Is Lord Wuming going to attack me? For my sisters, I'm willing to go through fire and water today. Meow. Osriel instantly acted as if she was about to be defiled, and then acted as if she was willing to go through fire and water to die a heroic death. What are you thinking about? It's just an experiment. Wuming turned his head and looked helplessly at Osriel, who was possessed by a drama queen, and complained. Experiment, meow? Osriel was puzzled. Although she had been acting just now, Osriel's puzzled expression was real. She was puzzled by Wuming's experiment. However, although she did not understand or know what the experiment was, Osriel still obediently followed Wuming to a corner. Are you ready, Osriel? Wuming pretended to be serious as he looked at Osriel. I'm ready, meow. Osriel said nervously. It could not be helped. Who asked Wuming to be so serious? Then, Wuming began to chant. The one who has the supreme divine power, the god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that is constantly surging, grant the world equal protection. After Wuming finished chanting, his body began to glow. Then, Wuming put his palm on Osriel's head. With Osriel's current height, Wuming could just touch Osriel's small head when he raised his hand. In an instant, the light on Wuming's body passed through Wuming's arm on Osriel's head. Immediately afterward, countless elves gathered, creating a strong whirlwind. Osriel and Wuming were like the eye of the storm, attracting countless elves with them as the center. Osriel was growing a little bit bigger, but the speed was very slow. After seeing the effect, Wuming increased the output of vitality incarnation. Then, in just a few breaths, Osriel grew back to her original state. In short, Osriel recovered from the state of a 10-year-old child to the state of a 16-year-old girl. Sure enough, vitality incarnation was also useful for the Skywing race. Wuming said in his heart. Immediately afterward, Wuming put down his hand on Osriel's head, and then said to Osriel. Check if you have recovered, Osriel. Osriel reacted instantly and began to feel her physical condition. Osriel was stunned from the beginning. If it weren't for Wuming's words, it would have taken her a while to recover. Meow. I've actually fully recovered, meow. Osriel shouted excitedly after feeling the state of her body. My lord, thank you very much, meow. Osriel knelt on one knee to Wuming. Wuming smiled. After all, as the eldest sister, you can't do anything without recovering your strength. The reason why Osriel followed Wuming was that she didn't want to enter the recovery device herself. She wanted to give the few places to enter the recovery device for recovery to the other sisters. Power is used to protect. Only by mastering power can you protect the people you want to protect. Wu Ming's words reminded Azrael of Arthas. Her Skywing race failed to protect Arthas. Then, Azrael looked at Wu Ming. Although Sir Arthas's death is related to Sir Wu Ming, Sir Arthas did not blame you. Instead, he entrusted us to Sir Wu Ming. Therefore, I persuaded the sisters who opposed and led the Skywing race to find Sir Wu Ming. Azrael got rid of her habit of speaking. When Azrael said this, Wu Ming understood. It turned out that Azrael had done some brainwashing on the Skywing race. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could they so easily submit to their master's enemy, even if it was the original master's order? However, I don't know if it's because Sir Arthas's status is too high, or if it's because I've been bound by the idea of the strong being respected, but I don't feel too much about Sir Arthas's death, nor am I too hostile towards Sir Wu Ming. What I'm thinking about is the future of my sisters. That was why Azrael had brought the Skywing race to Wu Ming so quickly. Wu Ming did not say anything, nor did he interrupt Azrael. He just listened quietly. I've thought about it before. Someone who was entrusted by Sir Arthas can't be too bad. Now that I think about it, it's not unreasonable for Sir Wu Ming to be able to defeat Sir Arthas. Azrael then smiled sweetly at Wu Ming. Protecting the thoughts of others. Is that why Sir Wu Ming is so powerful? I'll remember that. In the future, I'll also protect you. In order to make up for the regret of not being able to protect Sir Arthas, in order to protect Sir Arthas's final order, in order to protect my sisters, and even more so, to protect my dearest master. After Azrael finished speaking, one of the 12 stone plates in Wu Ming's heart automatically lit up. In an instant, Azrael's eye of the sword, which represented death, began to change. The sword became wider, and it became similar to a shield, which represented protection. Protect me? Wu Ming really did not think that there would be a day when he would need protection. If that day came, the enemy would not be someone that Azrael could deal with. However, it was her intention. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm waiting for that day. Chapter 456. After coming out of the corner with Azrael, the other Skywings looked curiously at Soundless and Azrael, who had recovered her body. After all, Azrael was still in her infant state. In just a few minutes, Azrael had returned to her original state. Not only that, but Azrael's aura had also become different from before. This could not help but make people, no, it made the Skywings curious. In addition, the gathering of elves and the whirlwind in the corner had also attracted the attention of the Skywings. They were eager to know what had happened. Wu Ming helplessly looked at the dozens of pairs of wolf-like eyes. I think the Skywings are not thirsting for knowledge, but for the unknown. When they all recover, I must give the order for all of them to learn and collect knowledge. Aren't you all interested in the unknown? Do you know the saying, there's no end to learning? Go and learn. Ahem. Lord Wu Ming has something important to say. Hurry up and call the others over. Tell everyone that the Skywings in the recovery device should also go and help, meow, because the recovery device was limited, except for the Skywings who had entered the recovery device and the dozens of Skywings who had stayed behind. The other Skywings returned to their rooms. By the way, the Skywings' rooms did not have doors or windows, and they could only be entered through the Skywings' innate spatial ability. Although they had entered the weak state of a 10-year-old child, the Skywings could still use their spatial ability to enter and exit their homes, although it was very strenuous. Afterward, the Skywings who had stayed behind and the ones in the recovery device left to call for others. The reason for this situation was because of Azrael's suggestion. First, let's talk about the change in Azrael's eyes. Originally, the Skywings' eyes had a sword-like pupil. Now, Azrael's pupil had turned into a shield. This was not entirely accurate. It should be a pupil that was both sword-like and shield-like. To put it simply, it should be similar to a broad-bladed sword. It was the kind of door that could be used as both a sword and a shield. A broad-bladed sword. The reason for that was because of Wu Ming's avatar, dependence. When Azriel really wanted to submit to Wuming, she happened to have Wuming's magical power in her body, which triggered the ability of dependent. Now, Azriel had truly become Wuming's subordinate. Moreover, she had signed a contract and formed a connection with him. Wuming could summon Azriel to help him at any time. In a sense, it was the same as Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot in the Godslayer world. However, it was more troublesome to summon Athena and the other subordinate deities, while the connection between Azriel and Wuming was brought by the dependent, so Wuming only needed to use the dependent avatar to summon Azriel, which was much more convenient than summoning Athena and the others. Azriel also noticed that she had a connection with Wuming, but because she wanted to be loyal to Wuming, Azriel did not mind at all. Then, Azriel proposed that all the Sky Wings should sign a contract with Wuming. Wuming was a little reluctant. After all, not all the other Sky Wings would be willing. The only belief of the Sky Wings was Arthas, and Wuming did not explain much about Arthas' spirit marrow, so in the Sky Wings' hearts, Wuming was the murderer of Arthas. The Sky Wings would follow Wuming nominally, but if they really signed a master-slave contract, Wuming judged that not too many Sky Wings would accept it. Anyway, that was what Wuming thought, but he could not resist Azriel's half-instigation and half-coercion. Azriel told Wuming that even if he could not form a contract with all of them, he could at least form a contract with some of them. Lord Wuming, you're not that bad in the eyes of the Sky Wings, meow. Besides, you're underestimating the Sky Wings too much, meow. These were Azriel's exact words. Afterward, Wuming and Azriel came together. Of course, it was also necessary to help the Sky Wing breeds recover. After all, Silent Wonder had agreed to Arthu's request. Now that the Sky Wing breeds were his kin, he had to treat them better. The Sky Wings were created god-slaying weapons, so they had strict rules when it came to discipline. Even though there were nearly 10,000 of them, the Sky Wings quickly gathered. Not long after, all the Sky Wings were in front of Wuming. Because there was not much space on Abondiheim's body, the ground, the air, and the trees were filled with Sky Wings. They were all waiting for Wuming to speak. Wuming glanced at Azriel, and she bowed to Wuming before retreating behind him. I've gathered everyone here mainly to recover your bodies. Azriel is an example. My authority can have a recovery effect on your bodies, so I wish to recover all of you in one go. The moment Wuming said this, almost all the Sky Wings were stunned. Even their original master, Arthas, could not recover all of them in one go. Also, Azriel has already established a contract with me, so I can summon her at any time. This is also my authority, but Azriel is completely willing. With that said, everyone turned to look at Azriel. Azriel nodded, indicating that she was willing to do so. It would be bad if the Sky Wings mistakenly believed that Wuming was forcing Azriel. Arthas didn't tell you, so you might not know. I'm a god from another world, and I might need helpers from time to time. After all, there might not be any more wars in this world, so I wish to sign a contract with all of you. However, this won't be forced. Those who aren't willing can leave now. In a while, I will restore the bodies of those who aren't willing, and for those who are willing, I will establish a contract when I restore your bodies. With that, Wuming waited for the Sky Wings to move. The reason there would not be any more wars was that Wuming had decided to find a god that could replace him as the only god and forbid war in this world. This could be considered as taking care of the humans a little. After Wuming finished speaking, he realized that not a single Sky Wing moved. Wuming frowned as he looked at the Sky Wings. Thinking that he had not made himself clear, Wuming spoke again. Did I not make myself clear? Those who aren't willing can leave. My lord, we are willing. Nearly 10,000 Sky Wings said in unison. With nearly 10,000 mouths speaking at the same time, Wuming was given a fright. That's why I said, Lord Wuming, don't underestimate us Sky Wings, meow. Azriel looked at Wuming gloatingly and said. We won't disobey Lord Wuming's final order. Even if we do, we'll submit because of Lord Wuming's order, meow. I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you have almost unlimited lifespans? Then, make killing me with your own hands your lifelong goal. This was Wu Ming's order. We can't follow you to another world, so we can't fulfill this order. What if you don't come back, Lord Wu Ming? Azrael was like a fox that had just eaten grapes, smiling at Wu Ming. Azrael was right. After all, Wu Ming was not a native of this world. Wu Ming had his own world, and he needed to go back. Although he would return to this world, he would not be able to do so many times. Besides, there are plenty of sky wings who have submitted to your spirit, meow. The sky wings were not idiots. Wu Ming had given them motivation and a goal to live on. At the start, many of the sky wings could tell. Now that they had calmed down, they more or less understood Wu Ming's words. With a series of reasons such as, I'll definitely fulfill this order, thank you for giving us a new goal to live on, and Lord Wu Ming's words must be obeyed, the sky wings completely accepted Wu Ming's contract. Wu Ming smiled. That guy Artrius really has a bunch of awesome children. Even I'm a little jealous. Then, let's begin. Restore your bodies and contract. With that, Wu Ming raised his hand. Wait a moment. At this moment, an extremely pleasant voice was heard. Afterward, she might have been sent flying by the shockwaves of the spatial explosion, which was why she did not follow Azrael and the others to find Wu Ming. Furthermore, Wu Ming could sense that this sky wing was much stronger than Azrael's. Furthermore, this sky wing did not have the slightest hint of violence. Furthermore, this sky wing was able to leave a Bondiheim on her own accord. Furthermore, this sky wing had not transformed due to exhaustion. There was no doubt that this sky wing was unique. Lord Wu Ming, she is Gabriel, the final sky wing species created by Lord Arthas. She is the final product of an alien being. It can be said that she is stronger than any of us sky wings, and there is an example of her single-handedly conquering a superior race. Wu Ming immediately understood. It was no wonder she was so special. It turned out that she was an alien being created by Arthas. Under normal circumstances, the first and last products were both special. As the first product, Azrael had the authority to command the sky wings, while Gabriel, as the final product of an alien being, had the greatest strength. However, the fact that her body had not changed caused Wu Ming to misunderstand. Why was Gabriel called an alien being? It was because she was an alien being. As god-slaying weapons, the sky wings naturally had strict team assignments. Meanwhile, Gabriel did not have a team and acted alone. It was very likely because of this that Gabriel did not participate in the release of Pseudo-Godstrike. However, this did not surprise Wu Ming. Gabriel's lack of participation was very likely due to Azrael's orders. No matter how stupid Azrael was, she would not let all the sky wings fall into a weakened state. Gabriel was the backup plan that Azrael had left behind. Wu Ming's guess was not wrong. Due to Gabriel's stubbornness, she left a Bondiheim, and Azrael could no longer care about Gabriel. She brought a Bondiheim and all the sky wings to Wu Ming. After that, Gabriel found a Bondiheim and returned. Wu Ming did not think that Gabriel did not know about Arthas' death, but from her expression and aura, as well as the emotions she displayed, Gabriel did not seem too sad. However, Wu Ming did not pay attention to that. What Gabriel had just said concerned Wu Ming. You said that you met a human with a severed arm. Where is he? Wu Ming looked at Gabriel solemnly. Unsurprisingly, the human with a severed arm that Gabriel had met was Rick. Wu Ming had sent Rick directly to Lucia. Only the heavens knew how Gabriel had managed to get there. Even if she had been affected by Wu Ming and Arthas' spatial oscillation, could she have made it that far? The reason was simple. Gabriel had wanted to use her spatial ability to enter the space where Wu Ming and Arthas had fought, which was Arthas' war god shrine. However, a spatial explosion had happened at that time, and due to the instability of space, Gabriel had been sent away by the spatial oscillation. She should be considered lucky, but she had made it in time for Wu Ming and Arthas' spatial oscillation. She should be considered unlucky, but she had run into Rick, who had been sent away by Wu Ming. As the most god-slaying sky wings, what they loved to do the most was collect the heads of various races as spoils of war. They would not let their enemies off just because they were weak or strong. That was why Wuming was a little worried that Gabriel would make a move on Rick. Gabriel smiled sweetly at Wuming and explained, Wuming. Don't worry, Lord Wuming. Because he has the aura of your power on him, I only teased him a little and did not harm him. Indeed, Rick's severed right arm still had traces of mana leaked from Desireless arm. If not for a special method, it would take a few days for the residual mana to dissipate. Thank you for not attacking him. He's my friend. Wuming's tone relaxed, no longer feeling as oppressive as before. It's what I should do, Gabriel said gracefully. Gabriel then revealed a dangerous look. Then, Lord Wuming, let's talk about the contract. Chapter 458. For her to stand up at this time, there was no doubt that she had some objections to Wuming's contract. I heard that Sir Arthas has entrusted us to you. Since that's the case, I'll definitely abide by this rule. However, the contract you speak of isn't an ordinary one, Giliel continued in an elegant and pleasant voice. Giliel's meaning was very simple. A contract was not that simple. Please allow me to ask a question. If I sign a contract with you, will I truly become your subordinate? Giliel asked. Wuming naturally understood what Giliel meant. She wanted to ask whether this was a simple summoning contract or a true master-slave contract. If it was just a summoning contract, then the Sky Wings would only be summoned, but if it was a true master-slave contract, they might not even have the ability to resist after signing the contract. In serious cases, they might not even be able to commit suicide. However, the other Sky Wings did not seem to care about this. It was as if they were really weapons, as they quietly listened to the conversation between Wuming and Giliel. It's not a summoning contract but a master-slave contract. I can summon you through this contract, and you can transfer your power to me. I can also bestow my power to you. Currently, I know of these abilities. Azrael is an example, Wuming calmly said. He then began to transfer his power to Azrael. Bang! As if she had been cast by a red devil, Azrael's body erupted with powerful magic, creating a whirlwind that engulfed the surroundings. That's truly powerful power, Giliel said with a smile when she sensed that Azrael's power had increased by a large margin. Giliel could sense that Azrael's power had vaguely surpassed hers. However, you can be at ease. The contract will only be effective on creatures that sincerely wish to submit to me. After signing the contract with me, although I can't directly kill you, I can still control you to a certain extent. Of course, if you feel that this contract is too overbearing, you can choose to refuse to sign the contract with me, Wuming explained to the Sky Wings once more. There's no need to say such things, Sir Wuming. The Skywing sisters will definitely obey Sir Arthas's orders and treat you as their new master, so they'll definitely agree to sign the contract with you, Giliel said with a smile. I'm only asking because I need confirmation. After all, I have to ensure the future of my clansmen. If I've offended you, please punish me. Seeing Giliel's apologetic look, Wuming simply waved his hand. There's no need for punishment. You're not wrong. Then, Sir Wuming, would you be willing to fight with me? As if she had already expected Wuming's answer, Giliel smiled and looked at Wuming. However, the ruthlessness and deathly aura in her eyes became even more intense. Wait a moment, little Giliel. How can you be so rude to Sir Wuming, meow? Azrael frowned and said. After being strengthened by Wuming's power, she appeared extremely dignified. If only I could get rid of that last quirk, Wuming laughed when he heard that. I'm afraid that you wanted to fight with me from the start, Giliel. Indeed, after saying so much, apart from confirming the future of the Sky Wings, Giliel actually wanted to fight with Wuming even more. Although it's a little rude, Sir Wuming, I won't lower myself to fight someone I don't agree with, even if it's you who defeated Sir Arthas. Instantly, Giliel's eyes were filled with killing intent. Giliel. Azrael roared at Giliel. This time, Azrael did not use her pet name of Little Giliel or her quirk of a meow. It could be said that Azrael was already angry. You're quite to my liking. Then, let's fight. Wuming also revealed a smile, as if his interest had been piqued, and he looked at Giliel wantonly. Azrael looked at Wuming with some surprise, clearly dissatisfied with Wuming's willful answer to Giliel's willful request. Then, Wuming's Giliel arrived at Wuming's inherent barrier. This planet that had already been pierced through could no longer withstand another wave of devastation, so Wuming chose his own inherent barrier. Because it was the ability of Anzavulga's staff, the first 8 layers that were destroyed had not yet recovered, unlike the ordinary inherent barrier, which would remain intact after the magician activated it again. Although the 9th and 10th layers were quite narrow, Giliel did not say anything. It was better to say that for Giliel, any kind of battlefield made no difference. While the Skywing species waited patiently, several minutes later, Silent Wonder came out of the inherent barrier with the miniature Gopril in hand. So fast, meow. Azrael had a surprised expression. This opportunity is really careless. She used all her energy to release Heavenly Strike after a few simple exchanges, so naturally, it's going to end soon. After Wuming resisted Giliel's attack, Giliel, who had no energy left, could be said to have lost. I'm a little excited, but I didn't expect Wuming, Sama to be able to resist my Heavenly Strike. Gopril, who was being carried by Silent, wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead, she smiled proudly, as if she had won the match. Although I can't use most of my powers, I can still use magic. When Giliel used Heavenly Strike, Wuming entered his magician avatar and used one sealing technique after another to directly seal Giliel's killing move. After all, in theory, in the face of a tsunami, you only need a flame countless times larger than a tsunami to evaporate the tsunami. Silent had made use of the principle of quantitative change leading to qualitative change. Relying on a magician's extraordinary use of magic sealing spells, he had sealed Jillian's moves. Fortunately, Giliel's Heavenly Strike was just a simple energy attack. If it was a noble phantasm, Wuming would not be able to seal it, at least not now. It's really annoying, meow. In short, Kitsune lost, meow. Azrael turned around, and her face instantly became like an idiot. However, because Giliel was being carried by Wuming, she did not see Azrael's face and said with a smile. Ah, that's right. Wuming, Sama got my approval. Wuming, hurry up and let all of us Skywing sign the contract. Alright, let's do it as soon as possible. Wuming also nodded. He had wasted too much time with the Skywings. However, Wuming, Sama, before that, can you give Kitsune to me for a while, meow? Azrael turned around and looked at Giliel like an idiot. Hey! Senior Azrael, you're like this again. I don't want to be your pillow. Meow, ha ha ha, it's still up to Master Wuming, meow, that's enough, you too. There are still so many people watching. Chapter 459. After that, Wuming entered Vitality Incarnation and released his mana, enveloping all the Skywings. Immediately afterward, the Skywings returned to their girl forms at a speed visible to the naked eye, but thanks to that, Wuming's Vitality Incarnation also entered a red alert state. After all, there were close to 10,000 Skywings. Fortunately, because it was not overloaded, the Vitality Incarnation was only used for a short period of time, so it would recover in a few days. After that, Wuming also activated the contract ability of dependence, and all the Skywings accepted the contract without hesitation, including Gopril. By the way, Abendheim also accepted Wuming's contract and evolved into Wuming's guardian beast. After all, which god didn't have a divine beast by his side? Just stay on Abent. In a few days, this world will be brand new. Wuming told the Skywings and was ready to leave. Is Master Wuming going to see that human? Gopril suddenly asked. Yes, why? Do you want to go with me? Wuming looked at Gopril. Yes, after all, it's too boring to stay here. Gopril smiled sweetly at Wuming. However, this made Azrael feel helpless. Master Wuming, if possible, I think it's better for you to take Gapril with you. First, she can't stay here, and second, with you taking a Skywing guard, you can let the other races know that you are our new master, meow. In short, it was a declaration of sovereignty. After all, many races had lost their gods. In addition, the battle between Wuming and Artesio must have attracted the attention of other races, and there must be some races who wanted to take the opportunity to join Wuming. After all, almost no one knew that the Star Cup was already in Wuming's hands. Many of those secluded clans did not really want to retire. If they won the Star Cup for their own gods, they would naturally rise in status. Who didn't want status and power? It was just that they couldn't fight anymore, so they had to withdraw from the war. If there was a new incomparably powerful god that was left alone, they would definitely not mind joining him or her and starting to compete for the Star Cup again. I understand. Gapril, follow me. Yes, Master Wuming, thank you very much. Because of Azrael's words, Wuming was ready to take Gapril to a conspicuous place to show the sovereignty of the Skywings. Wuming and Gapril flew in the sky at a leisurely pace. Master Wuming, how different is your world from this world? Gapril suddenly asked. Wuming glanced at Gapril and found that her eyes were filled with a thirst for knowledge. It was no wonder Gapril couldn't stay. How could she stay with such a strong thirst for knowledge? My world. You can say that it's completely different from this world, Wuming said as he flew. Oh. Then, can you tell me? Gapril's eyes shone like a wolf who had seen meat. Of course, no problem. Let's talk about language first. If not for my innate ability that allows me to communicate with people from different worlds without any obstacles, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to communicate with you. Wuming had been to many places, but he had never encountered a language barrier. There was no doubt that this was a racial innate ability of the origin dragon. Now, Wuming and Gapril were communicating in the language of the Skywings. Every time he came into contact with a new species, Wuming could always subconsciously speak the language of that species and communicate with them. This could be said to be speaking the human language when you see the human, and the ghost when you see the ghost. After all, Wuming was born from the origin that gave birth to countless worlds and countless origin dragons, so it was reasonable for him to have this ability. But Master Wuming, you speak the language of the Skywings very fluently. Your innate ability is truly miraculous. In this world, because there were various gods, the creatures they created all had their own languages, including humans. Of course, there was also a common language of the continent that had come from who knew where, and it could be said that every species could understand it. Wuming suspected that it was because of this planet. As long as one was a native of this planet, they would definitely be able to understand the common language of the continent. Then, is there a unified language in Master Wuming's world? Gapril continued to ask. That's not the case. There are many countries and regions in my world. Just like this world, they were also invented by the races of each region. However, in my world, humans make up the majority, and other races are in the minority. Humans also have many races, Wuming began to explain non-stop, telling Gapril about the world of Type Moon. Yellow skin, white skin, and black skin. Humans can use magic. Magic? Generally speaking, it's not much different from magic. True ancestors and death apostles? I didn't think that your world would have fantasy breeds. Is this a character named Rune? Indeed, I can feel the tremendous power contained within it. Not long after, Wuming and Gapril came to an uninhabited forest. Along the way, Wuming told Gapril many things, and Gapril listened very carefully to the stories that Wuming told her. This greatly moved Wuming, and he even displayed the Lune runes for Gapril to admire. After all, anyone would be happy to be able to listen to him so attentively. Just as Gapril was drooling like an idiot looking at the Lune runes that Wuming drew in the air, she heard a bang, and the Lune runes all disappeared. Master Wuming. Gapril looked at Wuming with dissatisfaction. Without a doubt, Wuming had put away the Lune runes. Alright, we're done with our stroll. It's time to get down to business. Wu Ming would not forget about business just because he was having a good time chatting with Gapril. Yes, yes. Then, Master Wu Ming, you should have summoned me earlier, he he he. He 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 he. Gapril then turned into an idiot again, letting out an extremely idiotic sound. Yes, yes. I got it. Wu Ming bitterly smiled. He did not see any other skywing species being so curious. Could it be because Gapril was the final product? Wu Ming even began to suspect that the skywing species that had robbed the old capital of the forest fairies and stolen all the grimoires was Gapril. Gapril's thirst for knowledge was truly too exuberant. Shaking his head, Wu Ming no longer thought about this. He purposefully looked around before opening a teleportation gate and entering with Gapril. The spies of the other species hidden in the surroundings wiped off their cold sweat and quickly retreated. All sorts of probing spells were also dispelled. Chapter 460. In a cave, the water around him shimmered with the light of special ores. Rick was still wearing his tattered clothes from the forest god's attack. He sat on a stone bench uneasily. However, he was not alone. In this cave, there were other ghosts that Rick had chosen. Rick had asked them to rest in other caves. Rick wanted to be alone in this cave. They were all missing an arm or a leg, but fortunately, none of them were missing. Wu Ming's potion was indeed effective. None of them were crippled or had their skin fester due to the black ash, but they were still missing an arm or a leg. The ghosts did not always apply the black ash. They only applied it when they arrived at their destination and began their mission. This meant that they did not have any black ash on them when they were on their way. Putting aside the demons hidden on the continent, there were also those who were alone or hidden in the path that the ghosts had to pass through. Any single person of another race who accidentally discovered the ghosts was enough to pose a fatal threat to the ghosts. Coupled with the dangerous environment, it was a miracle that the ghosts were only missing an arm or a leg. There were no casualties. This is the possibility of being human. However, in the face of absolute power, we humans are still too weak, Rick said self-deprecatingly when he thought of everyone's efforts. Rick had been returning to this stronghold ever since Wu Ming teleported him back to Lucia. However, his luck was not good. He ran into a skywing on his way back. How is that possible? Aren't the skywings at war with the forest goblins and goblins? Rick was dumbfounded. Without the black ash, the skywings had long seen through his human identity. Now, Rick was prepared to die. Oh, a special human. This feeling of facing death with equanimity. Are you prepared to die? As he had lost his right arm, Rick took out a dagger with his left hand and glared at the skywing in front of him. Although Rick used his left hand to wield the dagger, it did not affect him much. To survive in such a world, it was necessary for both hands to master the way to use weapons. Not a bad eye. Looks like I'll have a decent spoil of war today. The Empyrean wing smiled. As someone who was very familiar with other races, Rick naturally knew that the spoils of war the skywings were talking about were the severed heads. Well, it just so happens that I have something to do right now. I'll put your head on your neck first. It was as if the Empyrean wings were playing a prank on him. With a delighted smile, they took to the sky and left. Then, Rick slumped to the ground. Although Rick didn't know why the other party had spared him, the most important thing was that he had survived. I wonder how the Villo is doing. Rick began to worry again. No matter how he looked at it, the person who had taken his arm was not someone to be trifled with. Not to mention, Wu Ming had called her the forest god Canas. Although he did not know if it was the real forest god Canas, Rick knew that the enemy was not to be trifled with. The Earth's core has indeed been pierced through, so the star cup should have been released as well. Then, the Earth's crust shook violently last night. Could it be that the gods were fighting for the star cup? Rick frowned. Rick saw the Earth's core being pierced through, but he did not see who had obtained the star cup. Therefore, Rick guessed that the Earth's crust shaking was caused by the gods fighting for the star cup. Rick's guess was not wrong. Wu Ming and the Star Cup's consciousness were indeed fighting for their lives. It was inevitable that whoever won would obtain the Star Cup. However, if you think about it carefully, this is also beneficial to humans. No matter which god gets the Star Cup, the war will naturally end. However, Rick immediately shook his head. A god who can't ensure the safety of humans, possessing the Star Cup is equivalent to giving humans an unprecedented disaster. Rick sighed helplessly. I can only rely on you, Lord God from another world. After all, Rick still dared to prance around under the eyes of a god, but Rick really did not dare to snatch something from a god. It should be said that he could not snatch it. Humans without power could only lead the war to an end. If humans really had the power to change the outcome of the war, then humans would not be where they were today. Then I'm really honored, Rick. Suddenly, Wu Ming's voice sounded in the cave. Lord God. Rick looked at the source of the voice excitedly, but his voice came to an abrupt stop. It was not because of Wu Ming, but because a skywing species was following behind Wu Ming. Moreover, it was the skywing species that had let him go. In an instant, countless questions arose in Rick's mind. Why would the Lord God have a skywing species behind him? Wasn't the skywing species a subordinate of the war god Arceus? Could it be that the Lord God and Arceus worked together? Many questions filled Rick's mind. Seeing Rick's eyes constantly changing, Wu Ming easily guessed his thoughts. Arceus is dead. I defeated him. Wu Ming's words shocked Rick. To be able to defeat the war god who was known as the strongest in this world, did that not mean that this Lord God from another world was even stronger than the war god? Then, the skywing species behind you is. Rick looked at Jillian, who was still smiling. Now, the skywing species has already defected to my command. These words made Rick lose his composure. Let's put it this way. Just treat it as my reward for defeating the final boss. Wu Ming smiled at Rick. How can there be such a reward for defeating the Demon King and subduing the Demon King's army? Rick roared angrily. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. Rick rubbed his head as if he had a headache, then looked seriously at Wu Ming. Star Cup. How is it? Hearing Rick's words, Wu Ming smiled, and then golden ripples appeared beside him. Seeing the golden ripples for the first time, Jillian showed interest and curiously stared at the golden ripples. Wu Ming reached his hand in, then out again. In an instant, the cave, which was originally extremely dark even with the light of the oars, became as bright as the outside. The reason was the cup-shaped object in Wu Ming's hand, which was emitting endless light. Without a doubt, this was the Star Cup. Jillian and Rick both looked at the cup in shock. This was the symbol of the planet's ownership. Although the two of them had no intention of becoming the planet's master, they could not help but care about the Star Cup. This thing was simply too beautiful. This was Rick's first thought. Rick was deeply immersed in the warm light of the Star Cup and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 461. So this is, the Star Cup? Rick said in a confused manner. Yes, this is the source of the gods' dispute and war, the Star Cup. The entire planet was engulfed in the flames of war. Countless lives were lost. The sky lost its light and was shrouded in darkness. The ground was covered in black ash. The cause of all this was the beautiful little cup that was glowing in front of him. The ownership of the planet. The throne of the only god. Now, this war can finally end. Rick clenched his fist and lowered his head. A few drops of tears rolled down his cheeks as he spoke in a choked voice. Looking at Rick in this state, Wu Ming's Jillian seemed to have realized something. Her eyes were filled with thoughts. At the very least, you humans participated in ending this war. You were the victors from the beginning. Usually, only those who yearn for peace will get what they wish for in the end, Wu Ming said to Rick with a smile on his face. Also, I believe that even without me, you can save this planet. The possibility of humans isn't some weak force. From the beginning, Wu-Ming had sensed endless possibilities from Rick. The feeling that Rick could end the war even if he did not come to this world lingered in Wu-Ming's heart. If Shiobi met Rick, he would most likely be influenced by Rick's inner feelings. With Rick's opportunity and the Kikai Seed's ability, the possibility of ending the war was quite high. Of course, since Wu-Ming was here, he would naturally choose to help. Wu-Ming was glad that he came. Otherwise, even if Rick's plan was perfect, he would still die in the end. The Star Cup did not allow non-gods to become the only god. Wu-Ming could feel the rejection from the Star Cup towards Rick and Gopril. It was as if they would turn into ashes if they were to touch it. Wu-Ming's hand was wrapped around it. Wu-Ming, on the other hand, was judged as neutral by the Star Cup because of the Root Dragon's power. The Star Cup would not allow Wu-Ming to become the only god, nor would it harm Wu-Ming. It truly treated Wu-Ming as neutral. But now, there's another big problem. Wu-Ming smiled bitterly as he lifted the star-holding cup. Wu-Ming started to explain when Gopril's big, curious eyes and Rick's teary eyes looked over. Because I'm not a native god of this world, the Star Cup doesn't recognize me, and the Star Cup can only be inherited by the gods. In other words, whether it's a creation of the gods or a human, they can't control the Star Cup. Wu-Ming told them the bad news. Jillian wasn't moved. She wasn't interested in these things, and Rick's expression didn't change much as though he had expected it. You don't seem surprised? Wu-Ming asked. While I was waiting, I also guessed that humans might not be able to use the Star Cup. Furthermore, I didn't have any intention of obtaining the Star Cup, so I wasn't surprised, Rick said slowly. Besides, I originally wanted you to become the only god, although it's impossible now. Rick shook his head regretfully. The three fell into silence. Hey, Rick, have you ever thought about how gods are born? Wu-Ming suddenly asked. Facing Wu-Ming's question, Rick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began to ponder. My lord, isn't it because the elven corridor gave birth to a divine seed? Seeing that Rick didn't answer, Jillian spoke up. However, Wu-Ming smiled and shook his head. Of course, Wu-Ming wouldn't ask such a simple question. Otherwise, Rick wouldn't be deep in thought. What I mean is, why would the elven corridor give birth to a god? Is there a source beyond this? Jillian also fell into deep thought. She wasn't very interested in this kind of thing and had never thought about it before. She simply gave up after thinking about it for a while. If there were no god seeds, then there would only be one kind of creature in the world. Because only humans were born to live on this planet, the other creatures were all created by the gods. Wu-Ming's words gave Rick some idea. From what I know, every world has faith. If the gods rely on faith, they can become extremely powerful. Wu-Ming began to tell the story. Faith can provide the gods with endless power. The more people believe in the gods, the more powerful the gods will be. However, once the believers disappear, the gods who rely on faith will instantly fall to the bottom. This was basically the reason why the gods in the Type Moon world retreated. People began to understand the magic that could only be used by the gods, and it was Solomon who created the magic. People began to understand mystery, no longer held reverence, no longer believed, and slowly began to believe in science. As for the gods, they can also be born from faith. Wu-Ming's words shocked Jillian. My lord, do you mean that the divine seed is born from faith? Then, Jillian began to think. The divine seed was born from faith. If that was the case, before there were divine creations and gods, whose faith gave birth to the divine seed? Jillian looked at Rick. Without a doubt, the answer was humans. They had no power, no spirits in their bodies, and were extremely weak. However, they were able to play a role in ending this great war. Although in Jillian's eyes, humans were still insignificant, this war was just humans basking in her lord's glory. You should have thought of it, Rick. The humans' faith gave birth to the gods, and the gods created various races. Wu-Ming nodded, then looked at Rick. The forest god, the forge god, the war god, the doubt god, the ocean god. All the gods had their own duties. The war god was born from war, hatred, and blood. The forest god was born from nature, greenery, and plants. The ocean god was born from the ocean, various gods, and so on. Ah. Of course, I have thought of it. The thoughts of the foolish ancestors turned into a disaster for their descendants. How ironic. Rick clenched his fists tightly. At this point, he finally understood everything. Why were humans different? Why were humans without any special characteristics? Why were humans without gods? Why were humans so weak? It was all because there were only humans on this planet. Because of the human thoughts, this magical planet's mother gave birth to her younger brother in her own body. However, in the end, the younger brothers of the humans created various descendants, and the younger brothers ignored the humans as their elder brother in order to fight for the position of the family head. Or rather, they never thought of themselves as having an elder brother from the beginning. These humans were probably the servants of the family, the younger brothers thought. Then, the Earth's mother was scarred, and the only elder brother could not stand it anymore. He began his journey to end this farce of a family power struggle. What a crappy family drama, Wu-Ming mocked. Then, Wu-Ming looked at the disappointed Rick. Hey, Rick, we need a new god, don't we? Another sentence made Rick realize something. You mean? Chapter 462. Relying on the faith of humans to give birth to another god? Rick naturally understood what Wu-Ming meant. However, there was no god that could be born just like that. Even the other divine beings were born after who knows how many years. However, Wu-Ming shook his head. Rick, you're underestimating yourself. You're the leader of humans, a special human who could attract my attention. Although the human leader's words were a little absolute since there was no telling if there were other humans in this world, Rick had indeed attracted Wu-Ming's attention through the black origin mud in the star cup. It was because of his strong belief that Rick's voice could reach Wu-Ming's ears through the black origin mud. Haven't you realized that there's a god like that beside you? Rick's pupils instantly contracted when he heard Wu-Ming's words. The god of games. Rick remembered how he often played chess with that unknown existence when he was a child. Although Rick believed that the god of games existed, he didn't need to have such childish thoughts after becoming the leader of humans. Therefore, Rick never played chess again, nor did he tell anyone about the story of the god of games. It could be said that this was the first time Rick played chess with Shiobi and Wu-Ming in the old capital of the Forest Elves. The god of games, huh? Although it doesn't sound very reliable, I'll leave it to you, this world. Wu-Ming nodded, and then threw the star cup behind Rick's back. Rick didn't react in time. When he saw Wu-Ming casually throw the star cup, he didn't catch it. Gilliar didn't move either, and quietly watched Wu-Ming's actions. The ruined star cup looked as fragile as glass, and it was thrown by Wu-Ming just like that. Subsequently, the star cup did not fall to the ground as Rick had expected. The star cup floated firmly in the air as if it had been caught by someone. Then, a figure slowly appeared, turning from transparent to solid. This is... Rick stared at the scene in disbelief. She was wearing a green shirt, blue shorts, magenta shoes, and a jacket. There was a pink ribbon on the back of her jacket. She wore a checkered hat with a plum blossom logo printed on it. Under the hat, she had short white hair. Her cheeks were printed with hearts, and her left and right eyes had spades and diamonds respectively in her heterochromatic pupils. As expected of the god of games, his face, eyes, and even his hat were all pictures of poker cards. The god of games, a deity formed from your faith and your will. Wu-Ming explained. I'm Tetu. The god of games held the celestial cup in his hand as he hovered in the air, greeting Rick, who was staring blankly at Tetu. The god of games, does it really exist? Rick was a little excited. Then, Wu-Ming mercilessly slapped Tetu's face. At the same time, he is also the weakest god. Outside the cave, Wu-Ming, Rick, Gilliar, and Tetu arrived. Ignoring the fact that Wuming said he was the weakest god, Rick was still a little excited. This was a god who existed by his own will. Although he was born by your will, Tetu is the weakest god because it is only your faith. Wuming explained as if he saw through Rick's thoughts. Although you're not wrong, can't you give me a little face? Tetu chuckled. Although Wuming said he was the weakest, Tetu didn't care, like an optimist. Although what Wuming said was the truth. Well then, I'll take my leave first, everyone. With that, Tetu flew into the sky. Tetu, who had ascended to the throne of the only god, was now preparing to repair this world. It couldn't be said that Tetu was trustworthy, but as a god born from Rick's faith alone, his way of thinking was still simpler than the other gods. At the very least, Tetu, who was born from Rick's faith, was trustworthy. Perhaps it was because his lifelong wish had been fulfilled, or for some other reason, but Rick was now staring blankly at Tetu, who was flying into the sky, as if he was possessed, without saying a word. At that moment, Gilliar spoke while Rick was still in a daze after Tetu left. My lord, are you really going to give the celestial cup to the weakest just like that? Gilliar was a skywing after all, and her mindset of respecting the strong wasn't that easy to change. Wuming, the strongest, had given the greatest spoils of war to the weakest, which made Gilliar very unhappy. But she had no choice. Since it was her master's will, she could only endure it. After all, I can't use it either, can I? I only have one goal, and that is to help the humans of this world. Although the god of games is the weakest god, Tetu's feelings for humans aren't weak. Wuming smiled as he explained to Gilliar while looking at the sky. Perhaps the mindset of respecting the strong has been deeply ingrained in your mind, but I still want to say that humans aren't weak. However, Gilliar still looked as if she didn't agree with that. Through the thoughts of humans, other gods were born. Are humans weak? Not at all. Gilliar then refuted Wuming's words. But even so, my lord, humans are on the brink of extinction in this war. This is a fact that you can't refute. Gilliar first bowed to Wuming to atone for her rebuttal, before continuing. Even so, in the end, the celestial cup was still obtained by a god born from the faith of humans. It can be said that humans have won this war. Wuming smiled. After all, the condition for humans to win was the end of the war, while the condition for other gods to win was to obtain the celestial cup. I defeated Arthas. This is the result. I am the victor. Now, humans are the victors, and the victors are the strong. Gilliar then fell silent. Humph, whatever you say, my lord. As if throwing a tantrum, Gilliar snorted and didn't say anything else. Wuming looked at Gilliar with a bitter smile, then said with a smile. Well, you still have a long way to go in terms of understanding humans. I'm not asking you to have any desire to protect humans, I just want you to acknowledge other races. The mindset of respecting the strong isn't suitable for you who are my guardians. Yes, my lord. After ending the conversation between master and servant, Wuming began to admire the reconstruction of this world. Not created by anyone, not expected by anyone, not prayed by anyone, Tetu's voice began to sound in the sky. The nameless race that evolved from beasts to bipedal walking with their own consciousness and obtained intelligence, humans. Tetu's voice wasn't loud, but it was as if the entire world could hear him. For such a race, I, as the only god, grant you a name. Humanity, race of humans. The moment the humans were given their names, the sky of this planet lit up. The dark clouds all disappeared, and the sun was exposed. Plants instantly covered the earth, butterflies fluttered among the flowers, and birds soared freely in the sky. The entire world seemed to be alive again. Not only that, but most of the terrain was also changed, and there were more chess pieces on the ground. Next, the exceed 16 races, who claim to have intelligence. You will swear to the covenant as your worship, abide by the rules of the 10 covenants, and start a new game in this new world. Well then, let's continue the game. Listening to Tetu's speech and looking at the land that was restored to life, Wuming smiled helplessly. Well done, but all I can say is that as expected of the god of games. So, my lord, do you want the celestial cup back? Gillyre egged him on. Well, looking at the tears of joy flowing out of Rick's eyes as he looked down at the land that was restored to life, Wooming turned to leave. Since I'm not interested, I'll leave the rest to the players. Chapter 463. Wooming slowly walked on the land that was overflowing with life, admiring the scenery around him. The trees were lush, butterflies were dancing, and all kinds of small animals were coming and going. Birds were flying freely in the sky. Arriving at a highland, Wooming looked down at the plains in front of him and sighed. You don't say, controlling the Star Cup is really like controlling the ownership of a planet. In just an instant, the entire planet changed. It was as if Tetu had entered an editing interface. He formatted the dying planet and gave it new life. At that moment, Shiobi, who was following beside Wooming, spoke. Shiobi. I like the current planet. Shiobi looked at the land in front of her with a happy expression. Wooming couldn't help but look at his sister, who was smiling so innocently. After Tetu reorganized the world, he set the 10 covenants. Wooming didn't pay attention to the content of the covenants, only knowing that they were related to the game. Wooming couldn't help but complain about Tetu again. As expected of the god of games. In short, the entire world had become a world where everything was decided through the game. This way, humans wouldn't be deliberately harmed. After that, Rick brought the spirits back to the village. Seeing her brother return safely, Crone was so happy that she hugged her brother and cried for a while. Wooming, on the other hand, quietly cancelled his clone and came to the village. After all, in everyone's eyes, the siblings Villo and Shiobi had been staying in the village all this time. By the way, during the time he stayed in the village, Crone came to Wooming many times. Of course, it wasn't what you imagined. Crone came to Wooming to find out what her brother was doing. Of course, Wooming deliberately avoided this question every time. After some time, Crone gave up on getting information from Wooming and turned to Shiobi. After spending so much time together, Crone understood the relationship between Wooming and Shiobi. A kind and capable brother and a shy and innocent sister who always hid behind her brother. In Crone's impression, Shiobi and Wooming had never been separated and were always together. Therefore, Crone thought that Shiobi must know something about him. After all, she was a child and it was easy to get information from her. That was Crone's idea, but reality slapped her in the face. Shiobi, who had been instructed by Wooming, was naturally feigning ignorance and not telling Crone. Although Crone wasn't happy that she couldn't get anything out of Shiobi after half a day, thanks to this, her relationship with Shiobi, they were like sisters. Thanks to Crone, Wooming, but Shiobi, Shiobi. Even if Crone was willing to accept Shiobi after knowing her identity, it didn't mean that others were willing to accept her. Therefore, after a few days of recuperation in the village, Wooming decided to leave with Shiobi. He would let the image of a kind and reliable brother and a pure and timid sister be fixed in the hearts of Crone and the others. Wooming used the excuse of, Shiobi and I are going back to our hometown, and the current world is decided by the game, so there's no need to worry about safety, to leave with Shiobi. Wooming still remembered the scene of everyone sending them off. Crone hugged Shiobi and cried, while Rick and Wooming shook hands. Rick knew that once Wooming left, it was very likely that he would never see him again in this lifetime. Take care, Villo. You too, Rick. There weren't many words, nor were there any words of gratitude. With just a few words, the two of them let go of their clenched hands. Then, under everyone's reluctant and blessings, Wooming took Shiobi and rode the horse of this world that Crone and the others had given them and headed into the distance. After traveling for a while, Wooming released the horse and let it return to nature. Then, Wooming and Shiobi walked on the ground. After all, the two of them really didn't need any means of transportation. How does it feel to gain feelings, Shiobi? Wooming gently touched Shiobi's head and asked. Shiobi put her hand on the power furnace in front of her chest and slowly answered Wuming. Shiobi can't say. But, Shiobi is very happy, brother, is that so? That's enough, my sister. Looking up, Wuming felt the wind blowing against his face and said in a relaxed tone. I'm preparing to leave this world. What about you? Wuming asked. Shiobi understood what Wuming meant. She was abandoned by the Kikai seed and the possibility of her returning was not high. Therefore, Wuming wanted to ask if she wanted to go with him. Then, Shiobi shook her head. Shiobi is preparing to return to the Kikai seed and pass on her feelings to everyone. Shiobi stared at the pair of mechanical eyes. Although it was mechanical, it was full of charm and emotions like a living creature. This is going to be a tough road. Are you ready? Wuming once again patted Shiobi's head and exhorted his sister like an elder brother. Yes, Shiobi is ready. Shiobi will definitely let all the Kikai seed gain feelings, brother. Shiobi looked at Wuming with a smile. Through those eyes, Wuming read the firm belief. Wuming smiled and then activated the soul of words. A person with a supreme protective divine power. God protects him, the devil hates him, and no enemy can approach him. He is like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. Then, through his hand that had yet to move away from Shiobi's head, Wuming transmitted his protection into Shiobi's body. Feeling the increasingly powerful power in her body, Shiobi was at a loss. Wuming continued to increase the power of the protection. About half an hour later, Wuming stopped the protection. With this protection, even if Arthas revives and uses a divine strike, it will be enough to withstand it. Wuming let go of his hand that was touching Shiobi's head. Then, Wuming half squatted down and looked into Shiobi's eyes. With your brother's protection, you can rest assured and do what you want to do, Shiobi. Feeling Wuming's power in her body, Shiobi touched the core on her chest and said. Brother, do you still have the thing that Shiobi gave you? Shiobi asked. That metal ball, right? How could I have lost it? Wuming smiled. Then, he activated the golden ripples beside him. Wuming reached in and took out a fist-sized metal ball. He handed it to Shiobi. Shiobi took the ball and placed it on her chest. Then, the ball seemed to come to life and emitted light. Shiobi's core was visibly split into two, and half of it was sucked into the ball. Then, Shiobi removed the ball and handed it to Wuming. Shiobi has your power, so the core no longer restricts Shiobi. Shiobi has divided the core into two, and half of it has been stored in here. Brother, carrying her is like carrying Shiobi. But... Wuming hesitated. Logically speaking, as long as the core of the Kikai seed was not destroyed, she was not dead. Shiobi had given half of her heart to Wuming. This made Wuming feel flattered. This was simply putting her life in someone else's hands. Brother also said that the world is not dangerous now, and I believe in my brother. Shiobi looked at Wuming, her eyes full of expectation. She believed that Wuming could protect Shiobi's core. This was what Wuming read through Shiobi's eyes. Give me the heart, I will never let it go for the rest of my life. Shiobi too, with your brother's power, Shiobi will not let go of your brother. The wind blew, brushing the grass on the ground. The sun shone gently on the brother and sister on the ground. Everything was so beautiful. Chapter 464. Shiobi revealed Kikai's equipment and flew into the sky to leave. Wuming did not move, remaining on the high ground overlooking the land. My lord, are you leaving? With a spatial ripple, Gopril's voice came from behind Wuming. Gopril was a skywing, after all, so Wuming had her avoid arousing suspicion and not appear in front of Crone and the others. And because the atmosphere between Wuming and Shiobi was just right, Gopril tactfully did not appear. Once Shiobi left, Gopril appeared from space. What? Are you excited because you can't wait to go to my world? Wuming half-joked. Well, a little. Gopril smiled, the wings on her back trembling. showing how unsettled she was. Alas, Wu-Ming cruelly shattered Gopril's fantasy. For the time being, I probably won't summon you. Just obediently stay on Abant. How could it be like this? Gopril was like a deflated balloon, powerlessly slumping to the ground. This world has already become meaningless. Master, please hurry and take me away. Gopril was like a canary in a cage, looking at Wu-Ming with a pitiful gaze. That was because Te-Tu had turned this world into a game where everything was decided. That meant that there would be no more killing. This was hell for the Sky Wings, who loved to kill and snatch kills, as well as the god-slaying weapons. As a cute girl, it's not good to always talk about killing and fighting. You need to learn how to cultivate your character. How about this? Tell Azrael to give an order to all the Sky Wings that the new generation of Sky Wings is no longer a killing machine but a collector of culture. The current mission of the Sky Wings is to collect the culture and knowledge of this world. Whether it's to collect books or use magic to record them, gather as much knowledge as you can. The moment he said this, Gopril became interested. She had always liked all kinds of culture. By the way, after collecting the culture, the Sky Wings need to study it and learn the advantages of it. Don't be like bookworms who only know how to copy. Yes, my lord, your subordinate will do it right away, Gopril replied playfully, then fled into space and disappeared. Wu-Ming smiled helplessly and shook his head. Then, Wu-Ming said to no one. Aren't you going to come out and meet me? After all, I'm your benefactor who helped you ascend to the throne of the one god. After Wu-Ming finished speaking, a child's voice sounded. Ha ha, are you leaving? Do you still need me to send you off? Te-Tu appeared in front of Wu-Ming and laughed happily. It had to be said that after becoming the only god, Te-Tu could be said to be an omnipotent god. However, he could only be omnipotent on this planet. In any case, the current Wu-Ming had no confidence in defeating the current Te-Tuesday. If he were to leave this world, while he would not be completely useless, he would still be much weaker. At the very least, in another world, Wu-Ming would be able to grind Te-Tu to the ground. There's nothing wrong with the Celestial Cup, right? Wu-Ming ignored Te-Tu's joke and asked about serious matters. No, there's nothing left of that black origin soil you mentioned. If not for the fact that there are some traces left inside the Celestial Cup, I'm afraid I would have thought that you were lying to me. Te-Tu was like an optimist as he happily answered Wu-Ming. Incidentally, Te-Tu was still lying down in the air, using his arm as a pillow. It's best if you be careful. If you get corrupted by that thing, we might become mortal enemies, Wu-Ming warned. Ha ha ha, even if that happens, I'll only play games with you. I don't like fighting and killing. Te-Tu was not wrong. If Te-Tu was really corrupted by the black origin soil, with Te-Tu's spirit, the black origin soil would not be able to turn Te-Tu evil. It might even make Te-Tu an even more powerful good god. However, even if Te-Tu was a good god, he would still treat Wu-Ming as an enemy. That was why the black origin soil was so frightening. If the black origin soil was allowed to corrupt all worlds, then Wu-Ming would really become an enemy of the entire world. Forget it, I'm really an idiot for worrying about you. Wu-Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head. Well then, I'll be leaving first. Help me take care of the humans, god of games. With that, Wu-Ming's figure disappeared from where he was. Don't worry, I'm very fair, Te-Tu said with a smile, but that pink face of his was black no matter how you looked at it. And so, Wu-Ming ended his journey in this world and returned to the dimensional tunnel. Once inside, Wu-Ming was not in a hurry to head to the world of singularities, and instead flew out of the tunnel. Now, the flaws of this body could be seen. His authority incarnation had too many limitations and was not powerful enough. Even the divine blade of salvation that was one with Wu-Ming was only a replica in this body, and was not as powerful as before. Therefore, Wu-Ming decided to return this body to the furnace to reconstruct and evolve it. Wu-Ming soon returned to the root, and nothing happened because Kalas was there. Lord Wu-Ming. Kalas greeted from the head of Wu-Ming's main body. You've worked hard, Kalas. Wu-Ming said. You're too kind. Kalas replied, flattered. Wu Ming smiled and didn't say anything more. The relationship between the two of them was already beyond the point of needing thanks. Then, Wu Ming revealed the true form of this body, which was the body of the root dragon. Wu Ming looked at his main body, which was much smaller than before, and was a little troubled. So it's time to level up. Then, Wu Ming's consciousness disappeared from this body and returned to his main body. Wu Ming, who had returned to his main body, opened his eyes, and an indescribable aura filled the entire root. Then, the dragon horns on Wu Ming's head glowed, and the golden chains around him danced. If my main body encountered the star cup's consciousness, I might be able to kill it with one claw. Wu Ming felt his current strength and said confidently. Let's see which singularity Chaldea has reached. With that, Wu Ming's huge ruby-like dragon eyes turned golden, and something invisible flowed in his eyes. Not long after Wu Ming's eyes turned golden, Wu Ming's eyes turned red again. The ocean, huh? This should be the third singularity. So far, Chaldea had reached the third singularity, and it seemed that it was almost done. This was all because of Wu Ming's clairvoyance that evolved in his root. Wu Ming had just seen Chaldea conquer one singularity after another after leaving Winterwood City. The 100 Years' War, the City of Seven Hills, and Oceanus from Greek mythology. Although Wu Ming did not stay in Rick's world for long, it seemed that the flow of time between worlds was different. Chaldea had already completed 2 singularities, and the third seemed to be almost done. Well, I'll leave it to them for now. Through his clairvoyance, Wu Ming also saw the vampire that Wu Ming summoned for Olga Marie. She had contributed a lot on this journey. Not only that, but Gadotsi also met a lot of reliable servants. I'll level up my backup machine first. As he spoke, Wu Ming began to move his hands and feet on the huge dragon body lying beside him. Chapter 465. Inside the root of origin, Wu Ming had been upgrading his own body for some time. Because there were many things that needed to be upgraded, after Wu Ming came up with a general format, he put the body aside, and then channeled the power of the root of origin into the body, allowing it to be modified by the root of origin's energy. That's it for now. Wu Ming nodded the huge dragon head in satisfaction. Chaldea should have finished conquering the 4th singularity, right? How about I go to the next singularity and wait for them? Wu Ming thought and activated clairvoyance again, spying on Chaldea and the others. Oh, the mastermind has come out early. How unbecoming of a big boss, Wu Ming said sarcastically. Then, Wu Ming looked around. I don't think the root of origin will attack so coincidentally. I'll go meet that magic king. With that, Wu Ming flapped his wings and flew out of the root of origin. But then, traces of black matter appeared outside the root of origin. In the 4th singularity of the M-Moon world, under the magic fog city of the underworld, in an underground space similar to Winterwood City, 4 huge pillars of flesh with eyes released powerful magic power, wreaking havoc in this underground space. If Wu Ming was here, he would definitely recognize this thing. The demon god pillar that Lev once transformed into was such a disgusting thing. The residual magic power in the space proved that a few servants had just left. In front of the pillars of flesh, many people stood there. Wu Ming knew most of the people present, such as Gadotsi, Matthew, Pamilia, Mordred, and the others. They were all nervously watching a blue-haired servant with the body of a child talk to the mastermind controlling the pillars of flesh. Opposite them stood a white-haired man in ancient Israeli clothing. Just by standing there, his powerful magic power increased the pressure on everyone. The demon god pillars were arranged behind the man like stars surrounding the moon, and the identity of this white-haired man was already beyond doubt. The only one who could control the demon god pillars was that demon king Solomon. Having had enough of the boring conversation, Solomon shook his head helplessly. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I have to say that human weapons are just like humans. Both of them are hopeless. Upon hearing this, Matthew immediately raised his shield and stood in front of Gadotsi. Even though his legs were trembling, Matthew still firmly guarded Gadotsi. Instead, it was Pamelia who went against her usual arrogance. She had an unusually calm expression and didn't say anything, as if she was waiting for the right moment. "Oh yeah, are they going to attack us?" the blue-haired man said in a low voice, not at all afraid that he was about to leave. However, this did not mean that others would not be angry. "Tisk, you really make people angry," Mordred said irritably. She then raised the Emperor's sword in her hand and prepared to attack. That being said, even she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to take a blow from the Magic King. The servants who left before were the examples. "Destroy them, demon god pillars." Solomon just finished speaking, and the 4 meat pillars that were wreaking havoc in this underground space began to dance. Immediately, when everyone was at their wits' end, there was a strong fluctuation in the space. A huge dragon claw appeared in this underground space. As if catching an earthworm, the 4 demon god pillars were uprooted and then directly crushed. Bang! The demon god pillars didn't even leave behind a wail. All of them turned into pure magic and dissipated in the air. Gadotsi and the others looked at the huge dragon claw that was still there with a dumbfounded look. Obviously, they didn't react. However, Pamelia relaxed, as if the reinforcements had come. Mordred said in a displeased tone after sensing the restlessness of the bloodline in her body. "TSK, we're too late." Mordred complained, but her tone had already relaxed. Then, when Gadotsi and the others were wondering who saved them, Solomon opened his mouth. "I didn't expect you to come here with your original body." "Same here, didn't you also come here with your original body?" Wu Ming's voice came into this space. This voice is Assassin Senior. Because he used his original voice, Matthew easily recognized Wu Ming's voice. Immediately, the huge dragon claw turned into magic and landed on the ground. Wu Ming, wearing assassin's uniform, appeared in front of Gadotsi and the others. "Assassin?" Gadotsi shouted excitedly and threw herself on Wu Ming's back. Yes, I'm here. Also, a girl should be reserved, don't throw yourself on others so easily." Gadotsi nodded and obediently came down from Wu Ming's back and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. This couldn't be blamed on Gadotsi. The horror brought by Solomon was not something a little girl who had just become a magician for less than half a year could bear. It could be said that if it wasn't for Matthew's ability to protect her, Gadotsi would probably have mental problems now. "That's because you're always reliable, assassin," Gadotsi smiled. It seemed that Wu Ming left a strong impression on Gadotsi when he burned and polluted Winterwood City. "There should be a limit to how much you can ignore me." Then, the Magician King roared out angrily. After comforting the frightened Gadotsi, Wu Ming looked at Solomon. "You just wanted to kill them, right? The mastermind behind the burning of human rights." Because everyone already knew that the other party was the mastermind behind the burning of human rights, they were not surprised that Wu Ming knew about it. "I didn't want to kill them, after all, they are no threat to me, but those people over there have your aura. I can't endure it any longer," Solomon said violently, almost to the point of roaring. Solomon's eyes were blood red at this moment, and his mouth was cracked open like a monster. Black threads also appeared on Solomon's body, and countless magic power was released as if it was free. Wu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. Taking a closer look, these are not threads, these are all small black mud. Because of the black mud, Solomon had a strong killing intent towards Wu Ming, and this killing intent implicated Gadotsi and others. "Then do you want to do it now?" "I don't mind." Wu Ming became serious, and began to release magic power from his body, forming a situation where he was equal to Solomon. But in an instant, Solomon calmed down, and his eyes and mouth returned to normal. "I really forgot myself. These things are powerful, but they affect my mood too easily." Wu Ming took a closer look, and the black mud on his body disappeared, or rather, it was sucked back into Solomon's body. "You can really restrain yourself. Among the enemies I've met, there's not one like you." Everyone who was related to the black mud would not let Wu Ming go, as if they wanted to kill him. Then, they would be killed by Wu Ming. If they could calm down, they could still have a big impact on Wu Ming. Just like the consciousness of the Star Cup, if it could leave first, and then give the Star Cup to Kaina's, then it would be the only god by using Kaina's body, and Wu Ming in that body would not have the ability to beat it. After all, even the weakest Teto became the only god. Wu Ming did not dare to say that he could beat him. From this, it could be seen that the Magic King was able to suppress his desire for Wu Ming, and could be said to be the ultimate big boss. That's all for now, I'll bring you some good stuff at the next singularity. After saying that, as if afraid that his desire for Wu Ming would flare up again, the Magic King left. It was good that he left, this made Wu Ming worry less. After all, if they fought, Gadotsi and the others behind him would be a burden. Then, Gadotsi and the others, who had been silent all this time, began to ask questions. I'm sorry, assassin, although I would like to talk to you, we have to hurry back to Chaldea. After all, once the Holy Grail was retrieved, the singularity would begin to restore itself. If they didn't leave, then they would be killed by the self-correcting power of history. And now, Anderson and Mordred's body began to dissipate. After all, the Holy Grail was retrieved. Hey, I'll settle this with you next time, Mordred said to Pamela fiercely. I'll wait for thee. Pamela also replied, not to be outdone. I can finally leave. With him here, there's nothing for me to do. Goodbye, everyone. Anderson sighed with a melancholy and rejoiced expression, then accelerated the speed of his body's disappearance. Humph. Mordred looked at Wu Ming, then snorted and disappeared as well. So dishonest, Wu Ming smiled. Then, I'll start the race shift now. Everyone, get ready, Roman said through Gadotsi's wristwatch. However, Wu Ming laughed mischievously. Then, how about I go with you, Chaldea, control room. As soon as Pamela came back, she returned to her small room with the excuse that she was tired and needed to rest. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Wu Ming, the three stood together in front of Roman, who was dumbfounded. I didn't expect you to have such an ability, Roman said gloomily. Wu Ming did come back with Gadotsi and the others, but he did not use the ray shift. Instead, he relied on his own ability to fly back with Gadotsi, who had been turned into ray shift. Now, although Wu Ming had not reached the state of omnipotence in the use of time and space, he was almost there. Because he had stayed in the root for a long time, Wu Ming was almost reaching adulthood. It could be said that if Wu Ming wanted to fight Solomon just now, he would have a great chance of winning. Well, if I ask for the reason, you should know. Wu Ming's eyes seemed to see through everything as he stared at Roman. Ha. Ha. Is that so? Roman wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said nervously. I won't be in a hurry to leave. Tachika, Matthew, you two go back and rest first, Wu Ming said to Gadotsi and Matthew. Let's go, Senior. Senior needs to rest. Oh. Okay then, see you later. Gadotsi, who saw that Wu Ming wanted to talk to Roman alone, left with Matthew. Although there were other staff in the control room, Wu Ming only needed to use a little trick to let them hear his conversation with Roman. Initially, I felt that there was something wrong with you. Now that I see it, I understand the truth, Wu Ming said in confusion. I'm just a human now, a human who is working hard to restore humanity. Roman didn't feel nervous as before and calmly answered Wu Ming. If that's what you want. Wu Ming shrugged, indicating that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Actually, I want to ask something about you, Roman said after a moment. Is it about why I only showed up now? Or do you want to ask if I will follow Tachika and the others to attack singularities? Wu Ming could almost guess what Roman wanted to ask. After all, there were only a few questions he could ask. Both, and if possible, I hope you can help us, Roman said seriously. Of course, Wu Ming answered without hesitation. Huh? This surprised Roman. Didn't I say before that although I have my own enemies, they are generally the same as you? Then, Wu Ming smiled. And, I also like humans. Chapter 467. About half an hour later, Gadotsi and Matthew, who couldn't wait to have sex with Wuming, went to the control room together. Why is Assassin missing? Doctor, do you know where he went? Gadotsi asked Roman, who was working at the control console in the control room, when she saw that Wuming was missing. Could it be that Senior Assassin went to Chaldea alone? Matthew asked in confusion. After all, if he wasn't here, it was very likely that he had gone to other places in Chaldea. After all, Chaldea was quite big. No, Assassin suddenly remembered something and left Chaldea. Wuming and Roman knew each other very well for some reason, so Wuming told Roman his name. Assassin left? Gadotsi said rather gloomily. Although Matthew didn't say anything, her sullen expression revealed her uneasiness. Then, Roman smiled when he saw the expressions on the two girls' faces. But Assassin told me to tell you that he will help you at the next singularity. Then, you can have a good gathering. Really? That's great. I have a lot of questions to ask Assassin, Gadotsi said happily. After all, things like the relationship with Mordred, the mysterious dragon claw, the ability to suddenly appear, the ability to appear without the help of the Holy Grail, and so on were all very attractive to Gouda. Not only that, but Gadotsi also paid more attention to the super-mysterious identity of Wuming after meeting Stheno on the invisible island of the second singularity and Euryale on the third singularity. Of course, this was also closely related to the deep impression that Wuming left on Gadotsi in Winterwood. Strictly speaking, Wuming was the first servant that Gadotsi had ever met that was gentle, reliable, powerful, and wise, unlike any other servants. Like a big brother next door, Wuming constantly attracted Gadotsi's attention. Since that's the case, let's quickly start the strategy for the fifth singularity. I'm ready, Gadotsi said in high spirits. You're so motivated? Roman was surprised. Matthew also looked at Gadotsi in confusion. Although Gadotsi usually didn't hate the strategy for singularities, she didn't like it either. It was the first time that Matthew saw his senior so motivated. After all, we met Assassin Gadotsi scratched her head embarrassedly. At that moment, Wuming's little fangirl was born. Although you're ready to attack the next singularity, unfortunately, we haven't completely locked on to the next singularity, so we'll have to wait a little longer. Roman and the other staff members were also very concerned about the singularity. After all, it was the future of mankind. However, they still hadn't fully grasped the location of the singularity. By the way, before Wuming left, he left some information about the next singularity. However, because it was in a hurry, the information he left behind only played a supporting role. Left with no choice, Wuming temporarily cut off control of his main body and let Kalas move his body a little in the air. He instantly flew to the backup machine inside the root. Opening his ruby dragon eyes that were identical to his main body, Wuming looked gloomily at the black mud that was beginning to erode the root, trying to take root again. He shook his head with a headache. Fortunately, I held back. Otherwise, it would really be over this time. As Wuming spoke, he activated the power of the root all over his body, and the safety device inside the root was activated. Zap zap zap. In an instant, countless lightning flashed, and countless black mud were destroyed and evaporated by the lightning produced by the root. However, the black mud was still a product of the root, and since it had taken root inside the root, it was not that easy to destroy. Roar. Then, Wuming controlled his body to fly up. His whole body emitted the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, and kept sweeping away the black mud of the root. The black mud of the root was not to be trifled with either. It immediately turned into huge waves that swept toward Wuming. Even Wuming had to take these two attacks seriously. I'll definitely guard my home obediently from now on. After muttering in his heart, Wuming seemed to have made an important decision. Using the power of the root and lightning all over his body, Wuming charged into the waves of black mud and exploded. Boom! The explosion affected all the black mud inside the root. Even the root, which did not have a fixed form, seemed to be shaking. That's right, Wuming self-destructed. With the thought of, "You're ruthless, I hate you more," Wuming directly used himself as the starting point to detonate the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, completely washing away the black mud of the root. The entire root seemed to have been washed clean by Wuming's self-destruction, and looked very clean. Even the entrance of the root was blown open by the explosion. At this moment, Wuming's main body in the outside world opened his eyes, flapped his wings, and flew into the root before the black mud of the root could reassemble. Chapter 468. Having returned to the root, Wuming was like an emperor who had ascended to the throne once more, wiping out all the rebels who had taken the opportunity to cause trouble outside. The root regained its peace. Wuming had a headache as he collected the mana residue left behind by the backup machine's self-destruction, preparing to use the chaotic nature of the root to reassemble it. After all, this was the root, and it was something that could be done. And Wuming's headache wasn't because of that, but because of the self-destruction. Because Wuming had used the backup machine just now, Wuming had sacrificed the rook to save the king, and had perished together with the backup machine's body and the black soil of the root. As it turned out, the effect was outstanding. However, self-destruction wasn't something that could be done casually. Wuming's body just now wasn't his main body, and therefore self-destructed without any pressure. Then, he was hit by the spiritual impact left behind by the self-destruction. In all kinds of novels, TV shows, movies, and anime, people would see all kinds of people self-destructing. Some were villains who self-destructed, some were supporting characters who self-destructed to protect the main character, and some were protagonists who self-destructed to kill the big boss. Basically, the result was death. Even if there were resurrections, those who self-destructed would be as spirited as gods because of the invincibility buff they received when they were resurrected. However, Wuming had just used the backup machine's body to self-destruct, and then switched back to his main body to attack the black soil of the root that had revived from the ashes. Therefore, Wuming suffered a spiritual backlash after the attack. I'm guessing that guy must have tipped off the black soil. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Wuming held his head with his dragon claw in discomfort as he continued to collect the residue of his backup machine. The guy that Wuming was talking about was the Magic King, who had indeed said, "You actually came here with your main body." It was probably then that he had informed the black soil of the root, and that was when the mindless black soil of the root attacked. As expected, that guy is the real enemy, Wuming said with a serious expression. His previous enemies were all affected by the black soil of the root, and were killed by Wuming as if they had lost their minds. But this time, the Magic King suppressed the spiritual corruption brought by the black soil of the root, and could even affect the black soil of the root to a small extent. If he could really command the black soil of the root, Wuming's nest would have been conquered by the black soil of the root, and Wuming would not have to come back to save the situation. In short, the Magic King was Wuming's strongest enemy. Wuming, ouch, ouch, ouch. Wuming's, his dragons, and his dragon mouth, and again, to hold his head, to his head. The black soil, the root, the root, the root, the root, the root to the root, the root, the goddess he Wuming the magic root, the black, the god of the root, the root. Of the root, the root, the root, the root W, the of the root, the root, the root, the root. His hands did not stop moving. Wuming continued to fiddle with his backup computer. But, since I'm ready for this feast at Hong Men, if I don't do it properly, I'll be sorry for my identity. As if he thought of something, Wuming smiled joyfully. Fifth singularity, United States. On the streets of the capital, countless strong soldiers patrolled with long spears. Even the outskirts of the city were filled with these soldiers. If Wuming was here, he would have covered his face in embarrassment. Because these soldiers looked exactly like Wuming, but these soldiers seemed to have put on old makeup, and they looked like they were in their 30s or 40s. Furthermore, Wu Ming is an eternally 18-year-old dragon of origin. How can he be old? How can he be old? The White House, Washington. Countless soldiers with Wu Ming's face were stationed everywhere in the White House, including the streets outside the White House. The security was so tight that not even a fly could get in. In the small square in front of the White House, a queen surrounded by soldiers walked to the front. The queen wore a white fluffy cloak. Because it was deliberate, it could be clearly seen that the queen's body was only wearing white clothes that covered her chest and lower body. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a bikini. The queen didn't care about revealing her skin as she swaggered to the small square. Then, the queen took out a golden cup from her cloak. Holy Grail, please fulfill my wish. With just a sentence, the golden cup called the Holy Grail emitted a bright light. Then, a magic circle appeared in the center of the small square. It was used for summoning. Along with a burst of light, a figure covered in pure white armor appeared in the magic array. May I ask, are you my master? Maeve? The figure looked at the queen holding the Holy Grail with a slightly confused expression. Yes, my little Sai, my king, it's me. Queen Maeve smiled sweetly. Inside the White House, Wu Ming sat on the president's throne, looking at the charming woman in his arms with a headache. That's right, that white figure was none other than Wu Ming. Because he wanted to cheat, in addition to the Holy Grail's enticement, Wu Ming had arrived in a pure white armor that covered even his head. Wu Ming was inside the root. After seeing that the backup machine was almost repaired, he handed the task of repairing the backup machine and upgrading it to Collis. Meanwhile, he locked onto the Singularity's location and relied on the root to send a servant's body that he had set up in advance. Wu Ming's main body fell into a deep sleep again. He did not dare to leave again. If the house was raided again, the unrepaired backup machine would not be able to help him. Poor Collis was assigned by Wu Ming to guard the house again. However, Collis was also very happy because Wu Ming's main body was always with her, so it was not difficult for her to accept it. Then, Wu Ming opened his eyes and saw Maeve, as well as soldiers with Wu Ming's face. God knows how awkward it was to see all the soldiers' faces turn into his own. It was like going to the street and finding that everyone's face had turned into his own face. It seems like this is what it's like to have a common face. Ahem, fortunately, Wu Ming was wearing a helmet, so even if Maeve was in his arms, she could not see Wu Ming's awkward face. Wu Ming watched as Maeve pulled him into the room and made him sit down. Then, Wu Ming watched as Maeve sat in his arms, rubbed against him, and laughed happily. Only now did Wu Ming realize what was going on. Because Wu Ming was thinking about the soldiers with Wu Ming's face. Ahem. In fact, Wu Ming already knew that Maeve wanted to take him to this empty room to do something embarrassing. After all, it was Maeve, of course. Wu Ming, who retained his virginity, refused. In the end, she just sat in Wu Ming's arms and rubbed against him. Long time no see, Maeve. No matter what, it was not wrong to say hello first. Wu Ming and Maeve had indeed not seen each other for a long time. And then, that's all you want to say, Maeve smiled charmingly and said while hugging Wu Ming's neck. Now, Wu Ming only had one thought in his mind. And that was, Maeve, do you feel uncomfortable with this armor? If you feel uncomfortable, then come down. Forget it, you keep it yourself first. Wu Ming said weakly. Yes, Maeve smiled slightly and put the Holy Grail back into her bosom. Explain the current situation to me. Then, Maeve explained to Wu Ming what happened in the American continent. Because of the Magic King's plan, the American continent was chosen as one of the singularities. Therefore, there was naturally a demon god pillar that held the Holy Grail and served the Magic King. After that person awakened the consciousness of the demon god pillar, he used the Holy Grail to turn this place into a singularity. Then, he used the Holy Grail to summon Maeve. After handing the Holy Grail to Maeve, he left directly. After that, Maeve summoned Wu Ming's cyborg soldiers from her blood at lightning speed and directly occupied the capital of the United States, Washington. Because of the influence of the suppression, the Holy Grail also summoned a servant to fight against it, but because it was no match for Maeve, it was directly defeated by Maeve to the west of the American continent, while Maeve occupied the east of the capital, Washington. Just like that, the United States was divided into two parts, east and west. Logically speaking, the fifth singularity should have been like this. However, the Magic King, the mastermind behind the burning of humanity, suddenly jumped out, threw down a few more Holy Grails, and left after saying a few words. Let this place become the battlefield of the mythical war. These were the words left by the Magic King. Since then, several unknown forces inserted themselves into the East-West Division War, and the American continent became truly divided. Wu Ming, accompanied by Maeve, looked at the map in front of him and carefully observed it. Originally, the entire United States should be divided into two parts, east and west, but now, on the map of the United States, it is divided into 5 parts. The eastern part of the United States with Washington as the center, the Appalachian Mountains including the area to the east, this is Maeve's camp, represented by white. The entire Great Lakes, as well as the southern part of the Great Lakes, including Chicago, St. Paul, and a small part of the surrounding plains, this is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by yellow. The entire Mississippi Plains, the entire plains is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by red. The entire Rocky Mountains, the Missouri River, and the Southern Mountains, this is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by green. Finally, the westernmost Cordillera Mountains and the western coast, this is the territory of the servant summoned by the Holy Grail to deal with Maeve, represented by black. According to Maeve, the summoned servant was a lion head, and she didn't pay attention to its real name. It has to be said that this lion head servant is still miserable. Including Maeve, there are a total of 4 forces that hold the Holy Grail, and this lion head servant was squeezed to the most difficult terrain in the westernmost area. And now, he can only be said to be relatively lucky. That's right, relatively lucky. It stands to reason that the other Holy Grail forces can completely annex Lionhead, but they didn't do so. The green Holy Grail forces in the Rocky Mountains, which is closest to Lionhead's territory in the Cordillera Mountains, didn't annex Lionhead, not because of mercy, but because they didn't have the opportunity to deal with Lionhead for the time being. In Wu Ming's view, the green Holy Grail forces that are close to Lionhead and hold the Holy Grail forces are fully capable of eliminating Lionhead forces. However, because the other Holy Grail forces are watching in the dark, it is easy to be attacked, so the green Holy Grail forces didn't do anything to Lionhead. Because there are 3 forces that hold the Holy Grail, I directly gave up the territory in the west of the Appalachian Mountains and retreated to the east. I let the soldiers temporarily watch them fight each other. It was rare for Maeve to be serious as she analyzed the situation to Wu Ming. And this map is roughly made by me according to the connection between the Holy Grail. Although it is not too detailed, it can still be used as a reference. After all, there is a connection between the Holy Grail, and it is not impossible for Maeve to sense the position of the enemy Holy Grail holders. Then, Wu Ming, who had a headache, was just about to rub his eyebrows, but he realized that he was still wearing his armor, so he put down his hand. That is to say, whether I want to fix this singularity or rule this singularity, I have to take the Holy Grail of the other 3 Holy Grail forces, right? That's right as expected of my little Sai, but I don't want my little Sai to suffer. In fact, I originally wanted to unify this country and then summon you, but those enemies are really too difficult for us to deal with, so I summoned you. Maeve said, hugging Wu Ming's armored arm. Come on, let's start the war to unify the country, little Sai. Then, Wu Ming prayed for Chaldea and the others. Tachika, Matthew, you're on your own. Chapter 470. Although I still don't know the true identity of the enemies, I have a good understanding of them. Maeve said to Wu Ming. Maeve was the queen of Connaught, and she had more than just charm. Among them, the soldiers of the Yellow Grail are the most special. Maeve pointed to the area below the Great Lakes. Their soldiers are Dragon Fang soldiers. From the quality of their battle, there is no doubt that they are the Dragon Fang soldiers that can only be created by the magicians of the gods. However, I don't know if these Dragon Fang soldiers were created by the traitor witch. After all, Maeve had not fully understood the situation. Dragon Fang soldiers were skeleton soldiers summoned by the dragon's fangs. The reason why Maeve said whether they were created by the traitor witch was because of the magic. Legend has it that the summoning of dragon fangs was a family heirloom magic of the Greek king of Colchis. It was passed down to the princess of Colchis, Medea, who learned magic from the goddess Hecate. In the later generations, she was also known as the traitor witch. However, Demetrius was not the only one who knew how to use Dragon Fang soldiers. Wu Ming had also encountered servants who used Dragon Fang soldiers. During the War of the 14 Nights, Empress Semiramis's noble phantasm stored a large number of Dragon Fang soldiers. The number was beyond imagination. Therefore, it could not be defined based on this clue. Anyway, this yellow grail was related to Greece, so it was temporarily named the Greek Grail. Then, Maeve pointed her slender finger to the bottom of the American continent on the map. In the Mississippi Plains, the Grail forces there have ordinary soldiers, but if I'm not mistaken, their emblem is a mother wolf nursing a baby. After Maeve finished, Wu Ming nodded. That means, this is the army of Rome. The founder of Rome, Romulus, was raised by a mother wolf. Legend has it that the emblem of Rome at that time was a mother wolf nursing a baby. That's right, I still know about Rome. After all, Rome was established much earlier than Maeve's era. Even Maeve had a general understanding of the situation on the other side of the coast. However, I don't know which emperor it is. Maeve smiled. She did not care about this, and then she hugged Wu Ming again. In her opinion, as long as her king was here, all enemies were nothing. Ahem. Let's call this force the Rome force for now. What about this place? Wu Ming coughed, then pointed to the Rocky Mountains and the eastern mountainous area. This was the third Holy Grail force. What are you talking about? There are no soldiers. Mai Fu loosened her grip on Wu Ming's arm and continued to explain. Due to the distance, although I don't know which faction it is, I can still sense it through the connection between the Holy Grails. After a slight pause, Maeve continued. In addition to the fact that the other two factions didn't take over the mountain range, this third faction, the Holy Grail faction, took over the mountain range that no one cared about. Maeve's army was merely observing from the top of the Appalachian Mountains. They did not have a deep understanding of the situation. He was lucky to be able to see the dragon-toothed soldiers and the Roman emblem. That's because only these two forces are constantly fighting in the northern part of the Mississippi Plains. No matter if it's Lionhead's native forces in the United States, the third additional Holy Grail force in the Green Area, or our Celtic forces, none of them have made any moves. In other words, it's now a turf war between the Greeks and Romans. After digesting this information, Wu Ming said helplessly. This is really a mythical war now. Celtic, Greece, Rome, the United States, and an unknown force. There was no doubt that these were all surprises brought by the Magic King for Wu Ming, surprises that gave Wu Ming a headache. But, I'm a cheating player, Magic King. Then, Wu Ming issued an order. That's it for the time being, Maeve. Our side will stay in the eastern part of the American continent. Yes, my king. Now, Wu Ming was really like a king, and Maeve, the queen, began to listen to him. Then, I'll go meet the Greek and Roman soldiers first. You stay here and watch over our home. With that, Wu Ming picked Maeve up and placed her on the seat. He then strode out of the room, leaving Maeve alone in the room. It doesn't matter if he's not the Mad King, the Holy King Sai is really handsome, our home. Just like that, the seductive and wanton queen turned into a shy young girl who was yearning for love. In the corridor, Wu Ming walked without saying a word. In order to maintain his dignity, Wu Ming used the corner of his eyes to look at the soldiers with his face guarding the corridor and felt a sense of powerlessness. Why did I believe her in the first place? Wu Ming whispered in a voice that only he could hear. What Wu Ming was talking about was naturally the time when he gave Maeve his blood essence to create the cyborgs. But even so, Wu Ming also led this group of cyborgs into battle. I didn't feel ashamed at the time. Was I in a state similar to Chinibu at the time? Shaking his head in his heart, Wu Ming gave up thinking about nonsense. When he walked to the gate of the White House, Wu Ming waved his arm, and a blood-red cloak appeared behind the pure white holy armor. The blood-red cloak matched with the holy armor, but it did not become dirty. Instead, it highlighted Wu Ming's holiness even more. Farewell, Holy King. Suddenly, all the Celtic soldiers with Wu Ming's face knelt down and roared at Wu Ming. Wu Ming was startled. What the hell is with this roar? It's as if they want to beat up Wu Ming. I can only say that they are indeed Celts. However, for the sake of his dignity, Wu Ming did not show any surprise. Aha, Wu Ming responded indifferently. Then, with a wave of his hand, a pure white holy spear appeared in his hand. Wu Ming tossed the holy spear in his hand and it transformed into a pure white deer beast smaller than Funbaba. But don't be mistaken, Wu Ming's Funbaba was left behind in Uruk. This was only because Wu Ming transformed the holy spear in his current state. In short, it was still the holy spear, Yggdrasil, but in a different shape. Wu, the deer beast lightly responded, and Wu Ming immediately jumped onto the deer beast's back. Wu Ming, who was wearing armor, looked extremely suitable riding on the deer beast that was much smaller than Funbaba. After all, this was the mount that Wu Ming transformed into himself, so it was definitely suitable. Wu! The deer beast responded softly again and carried Wu Ming into the distance. That was the location of the Appalachian Mountains. Wu Ming planned to cross the Appalachian Mountains directly to his destination, the northern Mississippi plains where constant battles occurred. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.